of the management team is not going to be present. I met him last night. He has some medical issues, so he wouldn't be here. Thank you for giving us this opportunity, Senators, to share dialogue on the Department of Education. It was printed in the electronic media, and I'd like to hit it off that way. The legislature had put a legislation on that would require, they identified it as the 14 points or the adequate education. I want to make it very, very clear that all board members here and the management team will probably agree with me. We want to accommodate the legislation. But Senators, we need the money. We need the money to accomplish that request. It's an unfunded mandate. We also have vendors that are, I would probably say, it's safe to say, they've been pretty nice or keeping quiet, but the time is going to come when they say, I quit. Who else is going to provide these services? And I certainly hope that you will seriously look into this matter, because without the funding, we just keep prolonging the issue. And this body and future bodies will continue asking us the question, and the response will be no different. Funding. I think it will be proper for me, I just saw Mr. James Lujan, he's the newly elected board member, joined us this morning. Thank you, Mr. Lujan. I'd like to turn this over, if you wouldn't mind, Senators, to the chairman of the Budget and Finance, and kind of discuss it over with you, because he's much more in detail. Mr. Mendiola, thank you.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mark, please.
Yeah.
When we're going to talk about the budget, we're going to always preference the resolution.
Yes, sir. Yeah. That's what I have in front of me.
And understand that when you talk about your resolution, I don't know if you realize it, but the budget digest that was submitted to all the senators, there's an increase of $3 million. Mm-hmm. Just to let you know that.
Okay.
And if you're not aware of that, it'll be, I hope you'll be able to explain that. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right, sir. Well, good morning, Honorable Senator Sidus Masi, ni Astine Atempu Manayamzu, ni Department of Education, to basically share with you some of the budget challenges we face within the department, and of course those challenges, if we meet them together as a unit, I think we'll be able to get the best results for getting our students educated in the classrooms. And one of the things, when I first came on board as the finance chairperson, we had a couple of months before the January 30th deadline of submitting a budget before the legislature. So prior to me coming on board, there was some work that was already been committed, that was already done at the school levels, and the process is already was started, and we were coming in towards the tail end, and we want to ensure that we followed the law and ensure that the numbers that we presented to the legislature were indeed coming from the lowest levels of the, or I say in the trenches of the Department of Education. So as I understand it, sir, each of the schools had an opportunity to review their budgets as submitted by their principals. I know in my PTO, the principal of the school, Agra Johnson, actually came out and presented to the budget to the parents and said, this is the budget request from Agra Johnson that we're forwarding up to the department for its consideration. So all along that process, sir, I believe there was stakeholder input into the budget. And when it came before our committee, I wanted to ensure that when we submit the budget, we ask questions as it pertains to getting the funding directly into the classroom setting. And at the time, there were some challenges with respect to issues out there with lack of funding for textbooks, or lack of funding for or getting school aids into the school system sooner than later. And so I'm pretty sure you're familiar with that. And then all along those lines, sir, we've also had an opportunity to walk with you through the schools, and I appreciate the opportunity that you coming in as a freshman senator, me coming in as the newly appointed member on the Board of Education, that we have a greater understanding of what we're actually dealing with when it comes to the facility needs of the department. And so the budget that was, the resolution 2017-01 highlights, as the chairman mentioned, the 14 points that's mandated by public law that we submit. And so based on those 14 points, that's how the budget was crafted. I'm pretty sure you're well aware of that, that's how it was crafted. And so all these 14 points have a specific indicator, if you will, that we needed to put a dollar figure to. And of course, in my short time at the department, they educate me in terms of, how funding flows between the left and the right. And basically you have the operations side and you have the personnel side. And within the personnel side, there's a little bit of flexibility in the sense that you cannot transfer, into personnel, but rather personnel over to operations. And that's one of the reasons why the department, and I got to commend the department for, being innovative and being, prudent in terms of how they deal with the management of cash flow coming into the department. And as you're well aware, there's certain, legislation that's tied to certain funding, like the TAF fund, which I believe we garner about close to $16 million, roughly about $16 million from the TAF fund for some of the funding within the department. And then I got to commend our federal partners. We also receive federal grant funding for certain services within the department. And so being that there's mandates that we have to follow, these 14 points really just provides us an opportunity to put, the way I look at it, the dollar figure towards these requirements based on what the legislature, the previous wisdom of the ones who've crafted the 14 points. I know that we've asked for funding way above what we usually get from the government, and we understand that the government has to continue to operate. There's other priorities, but when it comes to our mission on the board, and I know with the Finance Committee, we've looked at the numbers and we've asked the department to go back and consider certain things. I know one of the challenges we face, and I share the same concern with you, Mr. Chairman, is regarding the textbooks. And so as we start to look at our budget constraints and, working with the department, our superintendent, John Fernandez, we have some aggressive plans, I know, with our current board, to meet with the superintendent and basically give some guidelines and goals that we want to see in terms of making sure our budgetary requirements are met, especially when it comes to funding the school system. With that, sir, we also, in the resolution, we've provided the budget of request of $323,927,66. And along with those lines, I also have to mention that we also had to include it by law, the request for the charter schools. The charter school budgets is also included in that resolution. So, of course, we're looking at the totality of the Department of Education when it comes to the funding. We also cater to the needs of those students that are attending the charter academies. And so we try to scrub the budget as best we can and get some of we ask some tough questions of the administration when it came to, when I say the administration, the superintendent's office, in terms of the operational needs and, what is the best fit for these folks. And so the resolution was passed by the board and submitted down to you folks for your review. And in the short time that I had opportunity to review with my committee members, the Vice Chair Gutierrez and Mr. Lohan here, every day we discuss the numbers within the department, and we do have some shortfalls. And we definitely need the support of the legislature to meet some of the shortfalls, as our chairman here alluded to outstanding payables to some of our vendors who have been very patient with the department. But we definitely need to come up with a strategy altogether to basically make the department whole when it comes to paying its vendors.
Okay, Mr. Mangiola,
Yes, sir.
I got a very simple question. It's actually twofold. What is it costing per pupil, per student in DOE? Is it, if I'm correct, is it $10,100?
The latest numbers, I do recall seeing a document, sir. We had for certain schools about six different costs per pupil for different school populations. That's the figure I saw. It's roughly about $7,000. About 6,500 is the figure I saw.
But Mr. Mangiola, if you take 31,000 kids and you divide that into your 323 million,
Yes, sir. It's about 10,000.
what does that come out to?
It's about 10,000 per
Oh,
student.
10,000,
Yes,
right?
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So I understand when you say that it's about 75 or 6,500.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, where's the money going to? And you don't have to answer that right now because that's going to go into some major details. I'd like to also recognize Senator Will Castro that has joined us. He's the Vice Chair of Education. But, I'm looking at the resolution, okay? And you remember that I was on the board before. And
Yes,
I
sir.
had some problems with that. The chairman knows, the vice chair knows. I have some problems with the 14 points that they identified. Because that 14 points was identified by law to make sure it is being addressed. Not necessarily meaning that you have to put a dollar amount on it. Is to make sure that it is addressed. And I know John shakes his head because he understands what I'm getting at. You put a dollar amount and capture it all. And the reason why I ask that, because if you look at your resolution, your 14 points, number 1 through 6 comes up to 161 million. Okay, and if you look at the digest, I think you're over at 200 some million. And then the next question I would follow with that is that on point 1 at 139 million, how much of that is costing the government today, DOE, for the certified teachers? Out of 139, how much are you spending today? What is it? I mean, so that we understand the vacancies, because my staff has been talking to DOE and it's in the digest, but we got to look through all the schools. That should be already answered here. If you say 139 for teachers, we're spending 70 million, 60 million. What are you spending today? Because then the legislature can understand where is your shortfall. Because if I'm correct, last year there was a realignment that was happening at DOE. They're realigning teachers. And normally when you do a realignment, you're taking where you have an overflow and putting it through your shortfall.
Yeah.
So that you would balance out. So, and I expect that probably the superintendent today will probably be looking at another realignment this year because of your funding shortfall.
Right.
But we want to know where the impact will be and how the legislature can best understand your budget, because you all understand that whenever the senators get together, they normally don't have I hate to say it this way, but a true budget understanding of the Department of Education. It's always 3 volumes of budget identification, but when they look at this resolution, the first thing it says is 139. What are they paying for today? You got professional administrators, 10 million. Is that all principals and vice principals? And then I'll throw the same question in that line. Do you really need four vice principals in a school, of a high school? And then we can go down the line.
Right.
But the people of Guam are going to ask the questions. Do you really need it? That many administrators? And then when one incident happened, I think it was at JFK, there was 6 classes that didn't have teachers. There was not enough substitute, but you had 4 administrators. They weren't in the classroom to cover that shortfall. I understand they play a role as vice principal, but they weren't in the class. So the attention was not the students. The attention was whatever role they play, when the role is supposed to be the students first.
Right.
And I'm almost sure most of you board members will agree with me. The students are first. Everything else, you catch up as you go along, but not ignore the students.
I understand that completely, Senator, and
Okay,
that's
so-
a great point. And I think everything is kind of interconnected. And when it comes to the operations side of it, of course, we lean to the superintendent for his guidance as to how he's addressing some of the challenges in the classrooms. But I do know for a fact, sir, that the previous budgets that were submitted in terms of the personnel costs, for instance, in the GEB approved budget of 2017, in terms of like the regular salary and increments, so you're looking at about $148 million. Well, a total of basically $221 million was what was approved in the 2017 budget. And that includes like reclassification of some of the employees, teacher prep pay, overtime, substitutes, and benefits. These are all tied into the budget when it comes to personnel costs.
Mr. Mark, I
Yes, sir.
understand where you're coming from. I'm looking at the same digest you're looking at.
Right.
And every senator has one.
Okay.
I'm just trying to get at is, number one, when you look at the digest, okay, we look at your resolution, it says 139 million, right?
Yep.
For certified teacher for every class in ratio established by a relevant collective bargaining agreement, the GFT, okay? Now, as I'm gonna look through the digest, and all the senators are gonna look at it, they're not gonna go through the volumes
Right.
of the budget. Could you please tell us how much is it costing today for a certified teacher for every classroom in a ratio staff? Just answer that question. If you can give me a number, then we can understand where your true shortfall's at. Because if you're going to say, well, and I know what you're looking at when you look at the digest, 220. You asked 220. I know you didn't get 220 because your budget was what, 241?
Yes.
It's inclusive of the charter school,
Yes.
correct?
Yep.
The charter school is able to work with 6,500 to include everything else they're required to do. I'm trying to see, what is it costing them? What is the 139 going to give you? Is it going to give you an additional teacher? Is it going to give you a bunch of substitute teacher? What else is it going to give you? Because it's not explained. And that's why I go back to the 14 points. It doesn't really answer the questions that you have in your digest. And it needs to. Because the board approved this.
Yes, sir.
And it's supposed to be a reflection of the 3 volumes of the budget.
Okay.
And I know where you're coming from because I was the chairman of finance for 3 years with DOE. And it's a monster.
Yes.
And the legislature refused to allow the board to sit like you're sitting today and justify why the school needs it. And I'm here to listen and I'm here to support DOE.
Yes, sir.
But I want everybody to understand, where's the money at? Where's the money today? How much did you get? If you're asking for 139 or 161 for the top 1 to 6, 1 to 5, how much money did you get for 2017? And how did you divvy up? Because I understand that the budget was given to you in a lump sum, correct? For 2017? So how did you break it down? And how were you able to keep the students' education a priority, the safety of the teachers a priority, and how were you able to survive and keep vendors paid? That's really what we come down to, because
Yes, great
the
question.
superintendent is looking at Tulling and everybody else says, we need to juggle, we need to figure it out.
Right.
Is there an allowance in the budget? And maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe what the legislature need to do is when we pass a budget for you and it becomes a lump sum, to allow the flexibility, because I know Tulling would love that. If there was flexibility to move money around so you can pay vendors and limit the restrictions you have, everybody would be happy. And you would probably say we can survive with whatever, because the governor's only, I think approving you for 229 million?
Around that, sir.
And the legislatures of every year has always given more. But as we pursue the giving more, we need to make sure that we know where it's going.
Roger that, sir.
Exactly where it's going, because you're not getting Simon Sanchez built soon.
Yeah.
or any other school being repaired.
Very, very interesting, great point, sir. And I just want to say, in terms of the new positions that we submitted on the 2018, just to hinge on that thought, sir, one of the needs that was identified in the school system was school aides. And so in the 2018 budget, we are appropriating about 116 school aides, additional school aides that will be in the schools. And these school aides would also have a specialty in terms of being able to deal with children with special needs. And so that's going to basically, that's a big funding request in terms of the school aides into the school system. In addition to that, we've also have some specialty need folks that we need to hire to meet the needs of our students with special needs. And so with that, that's where some of the costs are. So we basically have, sir, a listing that we can provide to you of the new positions that is part of the 2018 budget submission. And it basically highlights these positions as critical for the classroom or in the school system itself. I do know that we're going to continue to work with the superintendent and and set those priorities in terms of those hiring. But you make a very valid point, and I do know in the 2018 budget, that was one of the biggest questions we had to the administrators at the time was, okay, we know there's a shortfall in school aides or assistants out there within the schools. What are we going to do that to meet those needs? And so that's one of the reasons why we supported that increase in providing school aides to the schools.
And I'll go back, Mr. Mendiola, to my very first question. Could one of the board members or the superintendent please tell us, point number 1, 14 points, 139 million you're asking for teachers. What is it costing the Department of Education today for certified teachers in a classroom? Today, your current field position, what is it costing? And what is that numbers? Mr. Superintendent, you can answer because you're part of the board. Feel free.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As of March 31st, 2017, the certified teachers, on the certified teachers line, the year-to-date expended is 55.4 million.
And you probably have the answers, right, to 1 through 5?
If we don't, we will provide it to you as soon as we can.
Okay.
I mean, if I could, and if I just really briefly, I mean,
Right.
I know this focus is on the board right now, but I do want to just echo what you said, which is, we're working with a new committee, new board members, and I have the same feeling when I joined, which is the budget is this thick. And so you can cut and slice that budget any which way. So I just want to commit to you that any question that you have, we have the answers. If we don't have it here, we will work with your staff to make sure you have it. But things like exactly what you're asking, the actual numbers, the exact specific positions, we have that information. It, maybe somewhere in this bucket, we need to pull it out for you and walk you through it or generate the analysis for you. We're happy to do so.
Okay, Mr. Mendiola, Mr. Fernandez. And the reason why I ask that, because when I look at your resolution, and we did this for 6 years, and it would really puzzle us when I was on the board. How can we tweak it? I'll ask you today, tweak it, fix it. Make a resolution be something that every senator can understand and not have to look to the volume. And all the answers will be answered. When they talk about the 14 points, are you providing a certified teacher? The answer will be yes. Our shortfall is this much. You know what I mean? And then you start making it make sense.
Yeah.
Because looking at this, you said 55.4, so you need additional 134 million, right?
So on top, so 55.4 million is at basically half the fiscal year, right? So we're just going to use that to project our needs, and then we need additional funding for 18 that we're requesting, and so we can walk through what those details are. We have the same numbers for the administrators, counselors, school health counselors. We have those numbers as well based on the 14 points. Now, what I want to say, though, is that when it comes to teachers, I think it's going to be easy to come to the equation and the dollar amount figures. The bigger issue of teachers is, once we have the funding, are we able to fill those slots with the certified teachers? Because I think that's the bigger issue that, of course, we could also spend a lot of time talking about how do we fill the vacancies that we have because of the number of teachers who are available. But, that's That's why we don't, that's why when we request these, it's a budget issue, but it also lays over a much more complicated discussion as well about how to ensure we get teachers certified and in the classrooms for every student.
Senator Duggan?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, lady and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. First of all, I have a few general questions, but perhaps the more pressing question is, every now and then when we look at the budget, we always want to look backwards and see how the resources were received or not received. And in this particular case, in fiscal year 16, of the amount that was appropriated in that fiscal year, what was the cash received versus the appropriation that was provided?
If I may, we are just over halfway through the current fiscal year. So in the current fiscal year,
I'm sorry, Mr. Fernandez, I'm referring back to fiscal year 16, only because in that particular case there were statements, public statements pronounced that in fact there was a $10 million surplus received in fiscal year 16. So I wanted to go back to that and see and really match the appropriation by the legislature and what cash you received.
Okay. According to the Deputy for Finance, the cash shortfall was $5.1 million in FY16.
So the cash shortfall in fiscal year 16 was $5.1 million.
Correct.
Your resolution, if I'm reading this correctly, reflects 1.6, 1.7? It says, whereas the GEB continues to be concerned about the residual impacts of cumulative cash shortfalls, fiscal year 16 on page 2 of the resolution, fiscal year 16, $1.7 million, and then it highlights fiscal year 15, 14, and 13. So, Mr. Fernandez, you're telling me that of the amount that was appropriated for fiscal year 16, in which supposedly the government received a $10 million surplus, DOE did not receive $5.1 billion.
We can verify that. I believe this was referring to the TEF fund, so let me.
So just specifically the TEF?
Yeah, so based on the resolution.
Okay, so overall, that's the 1.7 is included in the 5.1? Or is that just general
Let me
fund?
confirm that
Yes,
with our deputy. But what I believe the numbers here we're focusing on the TEF shortfall itself, so that may not be reflective of the overall.
So it could conceivably be 5.1 plus 1.7.
I believe at 5.1 would be the total.
Will be a total.
But let me
Okay.
confirm that just to be.
Okay, so starting off, DOE did not receive for fiscal year 16 $5.1 million in cash that was supposed to be provided to the department for its operations. Now looking at going back to Mr. Fernandez and Mr. Mendiola and members of the board, perhaps there needs to be clarification in regards to the per pupil costs, because one of the statements that was made a little earlier was reflected on the $323 million, which is a request. Mm-hmm. What was actually appropriated, for example, in 2017, fiscal year 2017 was $232 million. So can I get a number of what your per pupil cost is? I know, Mr. Mendiola, you mentioned 6,500 possibly in that neighborhood, because the chairman did allude to a $10,000 per pupil cost.
So it depends how. I mean, we have a breakdown of the actuals. Do we have the actuals? Okay, we do have the actuals that break it down, and it breaks it down by how much are allocated to the schools, and then based on the school population. But I think this is the proposed, right? So based on the school, on the elementary, middle, and high school level, we have a school breakdown, and then separated out of that is some of the overhead costs. So those aren't included in the per pupil funding, nor does it include any federal funds which are available to all schools, public, non-public.
Okay, so you've broken it down into the 34 schools? Now,
we don't. We have a. Well, I mean, well, this is the projected. Yeah, you're looking for the actuals, right?
What's your collective figure? All inclusive, all public schools?
For the proposed?
No, for
Yeah, that's what I'm
this
trying to
calendar
get.
year.
So let me get that information.
Okay, because I think we need
yeah.
to start off with that in terms of, you mentioned that there are certain items that are extracted out of that calculation. So
Right.
we're going to go with your calculation so that we're all on the same page in terms of understanding what the per pupil cost is.
I'm going to try to pull that out of the information we have here, but just in my recent review of it, it hovers in that 5,500 to 7,000. Let's say the elementary schools, which are what our current charters are currently operating at mostly. It ranges between the 5,000 to 7,000 range, and depending on the schools. So I had a question as well, because looking back at last year's appropriation, whether 6,500 was reflective of the local appropriation, and did it compare to the schools. My recollection of the actuals, and let me confirm because I know we're here in a public session, but my recollection is that if you averaged the elementary schools, and that includes from Chief Brody all the way to UPI in terms of population, it looked like it was closer to 6,200 per student. But I need to I don't want to give you, that's just my recollection. I can confirm that.
We can hold back before, I don't want you to make public pronouncements and then have to come back and
this is my recollection, and I just recently reviewed it, but I think we definitely can provide that actual number.
Okay, of all our public schools, exclusive of the academies or the charter academies, what's your student population?
The student population is approximately 30,500. It's about
30,500. Okay, now looking at your, let's go with vendors, and then I'll close out with this question and perhaps proceed with the chairman and Senator Castro. But looking at your fiscal year 17 budget allocation and your outstanding invoices, what is the amount of payables that you have to vendors that are outstanding today?
So the current, as of April 10th, 2017 is $11.6 million in accounts payable.
11.6 million in accounts payable. What is the amount of 90 plus days?
$5.5 million or 90 over.
Okay, and that's as of April 10th?
April 10th.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Fernandez. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Fernandez, I just want to, just doing the numbers, real simple. If we follow the 65, you said 62, right? 6,200. If we follow what the previous legislature had authorized the charter schools to run with, at $6,500 per pupil, it comes up to about $204 million. Okay? $204 million. Just picturing that number, looking at your budget of $326 million, how much do you get? Because it's not inclusive in this budget. How much do you get in federal funds? About 42 million?
Yeah.
So, and that's supposed to not supplant, but to help the schools, right?
To supplement the school, yes.
Okay. It's 42, plus if I look at the budget request of 323, that means you're going to have that's $360 million to play with. The numbers keep going up, and I'm trying to be very comfortable. I support DOE. Don't get me wrong. Senator Castro, do you have anything you want to bring up? Okay. Just going back, I look at the resolution, the 14 points. We're just gonna go down the line. Okay? Air condition, 6.6 million. Reliable, and then I'll jump to 8 real quick because the air conditioners are always related to the reliable supply of electricity. I never could understand that when I was on the board. Reliable supply of electricity, that's a GPA issue, that's not a DOE issue. It's you being able to pay your power bill is the issue. Okay? So if we look at 6 and looking at 8, number 6, I brought this up to the management at one time, $6.6 million for air conditioning. I know that Southern High's air con went down. I know it's going to cost about probably $500,000 to get it all up and running so that you don't lose what you spend on the auditorium or for any other areas there from deteriorating faster. But $6.6 million, how many air conditioners are you going to replace? That's something you'd have to get back to us. And that's why I referred to this 14 points. It doesn't really answer the question. It just gives, you put a dollar amount, You're not going to tell me exactly, because I sat in the management and one time they said maybe 100 air conditioners. I said, okay, let's throw a number out, $10,000 per air conditioner, $1 million. Where are you putting the other $5 million? They brought up maintenance. Gosh, if you follow the procurement law, when you buy the air conditioner, you're supposed to put a 5-year warranty to include maintenance. So after the 5th year, then I can see you having that money you're requesting for it, right? Because the vendor should come in. I think I was down there at Southern when JRN was there. It was a carrier unit, but it was JRN. I spoke to the carrier folks. They sold the equipment to them when it should have been bought from carrier, because they're the experts. They can actually give you a bigger warranty, better than any other vendor. And as I spoke to other folks, when we're talking about air conditioning and your power, remember, Mr. Fernandez, we talked about renewable energy, conservation. You know, I'm meeting with everybody else in that business to find out what it would cost. And most of them have asked that if they were given an opportunity to bid, they would bid the amount of only 80% of your savings, all they're asking to pay. They could bring your power bill down to from 12 to maybe 8 or $7 million a year, and maybe even eliminate your air conditioning problem, because they would go in there and replace it all. That's part of their package they're offering right now, the businesses out there. But I'm not saying you need to go there, but that's something that I'm just wondering why the board has not brought that up. Not necessarily because the board is new, but management has not brought that up to the legislature or the previous legislature.
Well,
Sir?
actually, sir, if I may, I think, well, number one, definitely can get you the numbers on the AC maintenance. Now, usually, as when we purchase the air conditioners, I think law requires us to include a 5-year warranty with those purchases. But that only includes 1-year maintenance, and then you have to maintain it to ensure the warranty continues to be valid, because the warranty will only cover, certain kinds of events, but it requires that there's regular maintenance. So there is that maintenance cost that exists, and so that will be an ongoing cost. Now, when you get to replacement cost, that like you said, if you expect the life cycle to be around 5 years, then you're right. At the end of 5 years, then you expect to see some replacement numbers coming in to purchase and replace those ACs that have gone down. So definitely can, as much detail as you want on that, we can talk to you about the challenges and the work that's currently going on. With regard to renewable energy, we're very supportive of renewable energy. In fact, I do think the previous legislature tried to or worked to support that and doing a couple of things. Number one was for the lease schools, allowing the lease schools to go ahead and enter into power purchase agreements in order to provide us the renewable energy source, and that would bypass normal procurement procedures. And so right now we are in discussion with the draft power purchase agreement between ourselves and the landlords of the 4 schools, Okudu High School, Atacao Elementary, Liguan Elementary, and Estumbo Middle School, to install solar panels. The difficulty there is that it's taken a long time to kind of work through the process and get the necessary approvals. You need GPA's approval, which we eventually received, as well as some of their technical advice. We've gotten the AG's review on it. I believe the AG sent it back for further work to ensure that we are getting the best deal possible. One of the difficulties with that is that anytime when you're negotiating at a point in time. So the cost of fuel or the cost of energy at a certain point in time, that's what you deal with. If it drops, your deal might not look as good. If it goes up, it might look even better. So as time goes on too, the negotiation needs to change. So I just want to let you know that's in advance right now, but we're hoping to see that first as a test case for renewables and bring our costs down. With regard to the remainder of the schools, the non-lease schools, there is a law that places GSA as the procuring agency for renewable energy for the remainder of the schools. So we haven't heard any updates from GSA on that front, but that's, we've been focusing on trying to get the lease schools. That typically should be faster, but GSA would be responsible for the rest of the schools, so it's a matter of them kind of telling us how to proceed.
GSA has not responded?
Well, we haven't received any recent updates, so it would be worth checking in to see if there is any forward progress in putting together the procurement vehicle for the remainder of the non-lease schools.
Okay, as the department has considered putting out an what do you call that, for information, RFI, for all the schools and ask all the vendors on island?
Yes, that occurred.
That has occurred. And what's the result? And the only reason I'm asking this is because there are some agencies in the government that GSA has kind of like tied all your hands. And if we're going to get the best value at the lowest cost, okay, not the cheapest item on the market, because I believe air conditioners, there are some air conditioners here that can actually last for 10, 15 years. They got a higher quality, they're energy efficient, there's tax rebates, there's a bunch of stuff out there. And you happen to be the largest customer for the Guam Power Authority, and I'm waiting for them to give me something so that I can present that to the board and to the DOE. But I'm just wondering, have you got any results from your RFIs? That's something you want to pursue? Because if it brings down the 12 million to $5 or $6 million, you're going to have a lot of support from the legislature.
We would very much like to see that. So again, working with the lease schools to, any assistance we can have in moving that through is going to be helpful to us. But with regard to the non-lease schools, we recognize, some of the other concerns about taking all the schools off the grid at once, but we don't see it that way. We see this as an opportunity to pilot and see if we actually generate cost savings for the department in addition to teaching our students about sustainability and modeling it for our students. And then the third piece, we have the ability, I think, if you go to some place like GW, where we have a lot of roof space to install solar panels, we think we have the ability to generate energy for the surrounding community if we are able to pilot in that fashion. So it's really a matter of just how do we move forward and do this when we know that, especially when we saw the Catholic Church beginning to we said, that's an institution that's around for centuries. They don't move so quickly normally. For us, we want to see DOE move in that direction and do that soon so we can see if it really works.
Okay. And like I said, just going down a little bit on your...
Yes.
I always have to refer to this because the people of Guam should be referring to this, but I don't really believe in it too much because if I look at the digest, it gives me a different picture. This document doesn't even give the people of Guam a snapshot of DOE. It doesn't. It actually, it robs DOE of really what they need and where they need it so they can get it done. I met with several administrators out there, and they said if they got $6,500 per student at their school, their schools will not have their current problem today. So, that's something that the board needs to try to digest and try to understand where they need to go. Number 7, potable water sufficient. That's not talking about your water bill, right?
Does that include water? Yes, it does.
That's about the water bill? That's not about the water fountains that a lot of them needs to be replaced? Or is it inclusive? Because if you're telling me you have a water bill of $2.9 million, have they identified all the leaks that are in DOE? Because DOE has got some old schools. I bet there is more leakage than there is consumption of water. I mean, Mark's laughing because he's seen it, and you've seen it yourself, and you're all doing a lot of catch-ups.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Sorry.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, sir. And I know through our facilities committee we've met, and I believe that the department has actually hired an individual with expertise and the equipment that is needed to go and detect some of the water leakages at the school has already been started. And so we're on top of that. Rest assured that I know the superintendent and his team in our facilities committee, when we met, we wanted to ensure that the consumption of utilities, we figure out a way to reduce that consumption and to ensure that if we are using it, then that's what we're actually using and not going towards waste. And so there is a plan, I believe, that they put in place to start going to the schools and identifying, especially the ones with high numbers of, the usage numbers.
Are you saying that, Mr. Mendiola, that GWA is not helping you? Or they want to charge you to come and check for water leaks? Because we can ask that question of the CCU, is that, they need to help their largest customer.
Well, I think there's an interest in both agencies working together on this for sure. I know that not in this year, but in the prior year, we did require GWA's assistance because I know the GWA was experiencing water leaks in the south. They believed it's coming from our schools, but we needed the equipment to detect exactly where those leaks were coming from. So we needed to borrow their equipment and their expertise in locating those leaks. But those are really on a, those are really, just certain hot spots that we wanted to check. So we think we need a broader way to go to all our schools and make sure we detect those leaks. And so we do have now some internal expertise, and I believe we have the leak detector to be able to help do that. But we may need the continued partnership and help of GWA on that. The other issue with regard to water consumption is the meters. And I believe in a couple of instances we've identified some faulty meters that resulted in readings that we need to be corrected. So our work with GWA in that sense is to validate the faulty meters and what the appropriate readings should be, and to hopefully credit some of that consumption that was billed to us to our account so we can reduce those costs.
I'm just hoping, Mr. Fernandez, that when your management works with GWA, they're not going to charge you what they charge everybody for a new meter, $3,000. I mean, I'm just very concerned about that, because that's the money that should go towards the students' education.
We're all one government, sir.
That's right, exactly. Moving along real quick, I'm going to skip number 9. I'm going to jump directly into number 10, which is I'm very concerned about. And we brought that up. The textbook, I saw the warehouse. Let's forget about that. Let's move on. There's a brighter future tomorrow. $17 million you're asking for. How much did you receive? Because I know you got a lump sum. How much money was allocated this year? How much was allocated the year before and the year before? And which year did you in fact buy textbook? Because the last article that went out, they said that somebody said you got $1.5 million in textbook. You got less than $43 per student. You can't buy textbooks. But I also was told that the money wasn't used to buy textbooks. It was for something else. And I honestly believe that the board members will more than likely support me, is that if you got money for textbook and it's not enough to buy for everybody, then hold on to it until you get more money so you can buy enough textbooks. And then I would ask the question, when you buy textbook, is there communication with the vendor that if the textbook is within a year and the board adopts a new textbook, is there a mechanism in place to replace it to the vendor and get your money's worth and exchange it for a current book? I mean, is there any good mechanism? Because I know for a fact at UOG they have that mechanism. And there was a law passed maybe 4 or 6 years ago that DOE, GCC, and UOG is supposed to get together and take a look at where you can get the books. But I'm leaning more now towards technology. Our children today need to be prepared for the 21st century. They need to be able to compete with everybody else. And it's not about opening up a book, but looking at their phone, their iPad, their laptop, and going after it. And the beauty about that is that on the computer side, if you have the program in place, which I know UOG is working with this and with your office, Vince de la Cruz, that if you get the laptop or the iPad, you can download all the ebooks. You don't have to worry about a warehouse of books. It'll be a lot smaller warehouse. The ebooks is free. It's part of the program. And more, I think laptops last good 5 years, and it'll be a lot cheaper than $17 million for the year. You'll probably spend 10, if not 12 million the first year, but the following year you'll be looking at maybe $1 million or $2 million to make sure that you have books. I mean, money for, the kids will drop, even adults drop their laptop and iPads often. I mean, Senator Castro does that often. He's got a lot of money. He buys laptops every now and then, but you can put those factors in. When the kids drop it, it's expected. Or if it got stolen, I know the department can work it with the parents, so there is a commitment that if it's through negligence and determined and proven to be negligence, that the parents will pay for the laptops. We just work it. And the beauty is when I spoke to Yuji Romel and Vincent Cruz, the Wi-Fi can be available island-wide to all the students. So when they open up their laptop or iPad, because they're hooked up into the education Wi-Fi, they can pick up all their books. A lot of things get resolved. It becomes cheaper. Can I get your opinion on that one?
Well, sir, so first of all, I do want to address the textbooks in the warehouse just briefly. I mean, number one is, like you said, it is what it is in the past, and I'm glad we were able to, and I think the attention that it received over the past month or so is that it resulted in more people showing up to pick up some of the free materials that were there. It was generated, this warehouse of textbooks was generated by the same concern that I think had been expressed by the legislature and our board and everybody else about walking into schools and going into a storage room and all of a sudden seeing these books that were stored, the material that were stored there, and say, what's going on? Well, they don't need it anymore, we're storing it, we might need it. So what we did as a district was, as we walked through the schools, we made it clear that if there are materials and textbooks that you have stored up, number one, make sure that your teachers are able to use it and that they're willing to. And if they are, then all we ask is that you make sure they don't deteriorate, that you push them into the classroom and not keep them stored away. So that was the first directive. If they aren't needed because of you move to another textbook, we're not working with the same curriculum, let's pull those out of your school so you can use those classrooms or office space or wherever it is, because sometimes they would be in a classroom and it would just be there and you worried about the termites and other things. So we actually moved in a very major and labor-intensive operation to pull all of those things into the warehouse. And then we realized that even though whole classes or schools were not using the textbooks, there might be individual teachers who said, "Oh, we can use this as our personal resources," and we said we encourage that. I think the participation this past week has been really high. So the word getting out there even more, encouraging them to come by. They've been able to take those resources, the ones that they want and can use, then it becomes their personal property. Anything else beyond that, we would donate to ZUDA as the mechanism that's already provided for. We offered it to Guam Academy as well. So, but what you're seeing is a lot of textbooks that the schools have said we're not able to use anymore. Now I hope the teachers are saying we can use them ourselves and then use them as a personal resource. But the effort is to not have a warehouse of textbooks sitting around, nor have them sitting around in the schools with no ability to get them out and share them. So that was the effort there, and I'm glad that we, like you said, that we've started to move these out and hopefully open up that space. The second issue is you're describing a world which I think many of us want to see, where we have a world of higher education and a world of work which relies very much on technology, and we need our students to have those technological skills when they graduate. So I always have the story that employers always say, why do your students add Microsoft Word or we know how to use PowerPoint at the end of their resume when we already expect that? So the expectations are higher for students now. So what you're saying is, we need to have more technology in our schools and the ability for students to be familiar with and to use technology, and they're way ahead of us. But with regard to textbooks, then the obvious question is, how do we address our textbook issues using technology? So what you're suggesting, we are trying to pilot already in some of our elementary schools on a small scale, the tablets, to be able to get resources on tablets. We're promoting free and open resources. We just came from US Ed, and they said there's this whole movement around open resources that are free, as long as they're all in line with your curriculum. How do you identify and share those out with people? If you adopt the textbook, you have the hard copy, but you want the e-copy, that still costs money, maybe even as much as the hard copy. Sometimes they make you buy both. So if we're going with the regular, like you said, the main publishers, the major publishers of textbooks, there may not be a cost savings, even though we will see the technology being used. So I would say overall we are supportive of moving in that direction, because we know there are resources all over the internet, all over from other universities that can be accessed, and we want to see how we can bring those to our kids. We need the equipment, the technological equipment. We need the infrastructure to be able to connect. You're talking about the community. We're just worried about if they're in our schools, do they have the ability to connect from every classroom? And then obviously you're right, at home, if they're taking these things home or they want it at home, how do we supply that so we can ensure if something is assigned to a student, we're not discriminating between those who have access and those who don't. So we're happy to continue to work with you on that. I mean, we definitely would like to see the discussion moving away from those very expensive hardcover textbooks to being more resourceful with the funds and flexible with the funds that are given from the legislature.
Okay.
May I add?
Before you speak, I'd like to recognize Senator Stevens has joined us also on the panel. Yes, Mr. Ada?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, you were there. Mr. Castro, you were there in the Department of Education when direct instruction was in place. And we're talking about the textbooks. I've seen in the electronic media and printed media the number of unused textbooks, and it gave a red flag to everyone. But we need to go back. When direct instruction was in place, and then all of a sudden, the curriculum changed to Common Core. When the books arrived, it switched. That's what happened. That's why there's an abundance. Now, I don't know whether there was an over order of books, but that was one of the reasons why there's so much books down at the warehouse, because of the change. Now, I'm even worried right now whether we're going to be changing curriculum again with the new administration. And I'm hoping and praying that they will give the individual states and territories, let them decide their own curriculum rather than being dictated by the federal government. So I'd like to go kind of just enlighten both of you, or the two other senators, that's what happened with why there are so many brand new books. Is because when the order came, there was a switch of curriculum. And many teachers, there are still some schools that use direct instruction, but there are also a large number that have discontinued. Thank you very much.
Before Ms. Gutierrez responds, are you saying you still have direct instruction in some of the schools? In the Department of Education? I'm not talking about the charter now. The Department of Education, because if I'm correct, I was on the board when we voted to go to Common Core, so everybody should change by now. That's been already 4 years.
So
Mr. Fernandez.
Yeah, just to clarify on that, we are standards-based, so we adopted Common Core standards as well as our local standards, and our focus is on achieving those standards. Now, we allow the schools the flexibility in determining how to meet those standards. And so, we allow for the use of some of the existing programs of direct instruction materials to supplement the work that's being done in the schools. So some schools will say, we want to use some of the direct instruction materials for the first and second reading because we believe it'll help us reach the first and second grades, first and second grade standards. They have to be accountable to meeting the standards. But I think the whole issue of standards-based is you can use a number of different and a variety of different resources as long as you're focused on achieving those standards. So I think that's what you're seeing in some schools. If they believe it's an effective part of their toolbox for a certain grade level or a certain content area, that's allowable to them so long as they're achieving the standards of what the students are expected to learn as adopted, as set out by the board. I think before it was very programmed, very strict, as you recall, direct instruction was a very scripted, very rigid. You didn't have the flexibility as a teacher might to say, look, I don't want to use that material because I think other resources might be more effective. You didn't have that flexibility because you were under a program that you had to operate with fidelity, and we had consultants who came in to say, you have to do it this way and that way. With the flexibility provided by a standards-based approach, we're allowing the schools, the administrators, and the teachers to determine how best to meet those standards.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand. Each school has the flexibility to adjust to whatever curriculum they choose to teach?
they are allowed to use the resources and materials that they have in hand, whether
That
they're
are available.
adopted textbooks. They can use supplemental materials, such as if they have a direct instruction, or if they want to use so it's the toolbox is bigger. I mean, it's not just one program. You have to use it whether or not you agree. I mean, when I came on board, there were a lot of schools who were saying, we've been using it, we don't like it. And then we said, so what now? They said, well, we want to switch. So now they have the flexibility to say, we're going to switch. But the standards set the framework for how you are to approach, meeting the expectations of what kids are supposed to learn. How you do it, you discuss as a school, you use the materials and supports that are available. The district will support you with some guidance and some basic, some guidance and framework for that. Right. But we don't say you can't use certain materials or only this material. You want you as the instructor, the educator, and the administrator to make some determinations about how to assemble your toolbox for the needs of your students.
But Mr. Fernandez, you have a standard curriculum. Am I correct? Right now.
We have adopted the Common Core standards in key content area. Yeah.
And Mr. Adams brought up that the board or the Department of Education would like to establish, I guess, a curriculum and not dependent on what the United States government is saying. Am I correct, Mr. Adams?
I'm waiting for word from our nation's capital or the Secretary of Education. What route are we looking at? What worries me, Mr. Chairman, is that there may be a change, and then what are we going to do now with the textbooks that we have that we just, we normally take about 5 to 7 years to use a particular adopted text. What about those books that have just come in, that are coming in? So what, are they going to sit idle again? It's going to be a perennial problem.
No, what I'm trying to get at, Mr. Adams, is that you do testing at the schools, right? You know where our kids are falling off the cliff, where they're at the medium, and where they're shooting at the stars. If you're going to establish a curriculum, you remember that when Common Core was adopted, it was something that was being asked to the board, and the board accepted it. Before that, it was asked to the board, and the board accepted it. I don't think there was any tie that's saying if you don't adopt it, we're not going to give you money. Because the consolidated grants talk about what you need, and they never talked about your curriculum. It's what you need to help the child. Am I correct?
Well,
I'm just trying to tie this, Mr. Adams, because I don't want us to say that the United States government or the Secretary, the U.S. Secretary of Education said, if you don't do this, we're not going to give you money. I don't think that they never said that. We accepted it, and I want to make sure that the board, you do have the flexibility. Superintendent, board members, you do have that flexibility. If you want to identify a curriculum that is best for our students, then identify it. But make sure you have justification, good evidence, test scores. You're doing the right way. If you need to, if you're saying, something you're saying, certain portion of DI is helping the students, then so be it. Then that's that little portion.
Issue. That's the
and then go down the line. I just don't want you to say that you're getting tied up.
Senator, if I just may add, just exactly what you're saying, that there are many schools on the island that are that still need that direct instruction, and the teachers are the best people who would know. They want to change, but they're looking also at the needs of the child. We're looking at the child as a whole, and just not collective, individual child's need. And I just found out that one particular school on island, the whole school is on direct instruction, and that caught me by surprise. But these are things that we have to admit. It's reality that each child's needs are different, and it is the responsibility of this department to accommodate to that particular child's need.
Okay, I'm going to ask if any of the other panel would like to have any questions. Senator Duggan?
But it's on a separate matter aside from the textbook. So, Mr. Chairman, if I could just deviate for a moment. And I know, Mr. Fernandez, you just returned, or I recall you just returned from a trip regarding this particular discussion, but, you know, right now, the federal funds, approximately $42 million is given to the Department of Education to be able to facilitate different educational requirements. Now, that's reflective of the high-risk status that was initially identified. How much has been paid in cash by DOE for these services over the term of involvement? And then a follow-up question would be, in light of your reoccurring cash shortfall, when does the department expect to petition the U.S. for redesignation as being no longer a high risk? So please, if I can get a response to those two questions.
Yeah, she's calculating it up. I mean, typically on an annual basis, it had started off at a high level, I believe around $4 million a year. At that time, the first 2 years were paid for by U.S. DOE, and then it fell to the department to be paid for from local funds. Right now, we currently are paying around $3 million per year for their services. Do we have a total? So we'll get the total from when it started to. So we're in the fifth year of our local. So we're in the fifth year of our local. It would be the fifth year of our local payment. So that roughly that'll be $15 million for their services.
So the follow-on question was, when does the department anticipate to request to get off of high risk?
So thank you for asking that. I mean, of course, this is an ongoing question, and that we're all interested in answering positively. So we did have, and we'll sit down with the board in more detail, but I did have an opportunity to check back in with our risk management office at US DOE. That's both Phil Maestri and Christine Jackson, Mark Robinson, all three of whom are familiar to many of us on Guam because of their visits. Much more frequently before, but they try to get out here once a year, and they're hoping to be out here in July again to do what they call their on-site monitoring of our progress. Over the past 2 years, we've been making steady progress, not just on our own calculations, but on based on the assessment of US DOE. And I think part of that has been very, very big part of that has been the implementation of our new financial management system. We've broken down some of our critical tasks around the corrective action plan so that we can really focus on completing those tasks, identifying who's accountable, given a time frame for how we're going to complete those pieces, ranging from fixed assets to procurement to their ongoing needs to update our financial management system and keep it maintained. Now, the third party is the fiduciary, so they basically are the folks who sign off before we can access the federal funds. But in the meantime, we're busy trying to meet the conditions laid out in the special conditions letters that come out every year, and then also implementing our corrections based on the corrective action plan and our own transition work. One other critical piece is that we have built up an internal audit office, and that internal audit office is going to be focused on what I call hopefully the tail end of our work, which is after we've implemented standard operating procedures, after we've tested and gone forward and improved our management based on our updated financial management system, we want to have an internal audit check on how we are operating, identifying areas of weakness and so forth. Things that you don't need an external body to do, something that we can do for ourselves. And as we do that, we'll feel prepared to move forward. So there are 3 areas where we hope we can seek reconsideration, and that those areas are fixed assets, procurement, and hopefully the manner in which we draw down and calculate and draw down indirect costs associated with our federal funds. So those are 3 areas which we think we've made tremendous progress in. There's some work left to do, but US DOE has also recognized that progress. So during my visit, we basically these periodic visits have been focused on what's next. And I'll be honest that US DOE doesn't necessarily know what's next. They haven't had this process necessarily happen so many times that they're experts at it. They've identified it, they've given us the special conditions letter, and then they're kind of waiting for us to pull the trigger. I call it pull the trigger. There is a section in the special conditions which allows us to request reconsideration of the requirements of the special conditions. And what US DOE will say is that, well, when you do so, better be ready, because the General Counsel, Inspector General, the Program Office, Risk Manager will all come out to make sure you are doing what you said you were doing, and you're doing it in a way that's going to be that's going to meet the requirements of the conditions, and in that sense we can then reconsider getting you off these conditions. Now, not in this past meeting, but the year before, we started the conversation about how do we do that? Does it have to be all or nothing? And the answer to that from them is that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. We can start by selecting those areas. So, for instance, fixed assets. Selecting those areas that we're ready to, remove from fiduciary responsibility, and ask them to reconsider that, and in piecemeal start to minimize this and reduce the scope of the third-party fiduciary requirement. So let's just say we have 8 key tasks, key areas that we need to address. Can we start to reduce the scope by saying, get these 3 off of the list of what the third-party fiduciary needs to oversee? We can do fixed assets, we can do procurement, we can do indirect costs, and let them focus then on the other areas where we still need further improvement. That's where the discussion is with USAID. They're saying, we think you're almost there, and whenever you're ready, we'll mobilize to come and check, but you guys need to be sure you're ready. So our job right now is to be ready, right? So in fixed assets, for instance, we feel pretty confident that we've got our fixed assets processes in place. We need to continue to audit and make sure that we're sustaining that improvement. But the big key factor there is the warehouse, right? So we know that. That's a big one. We got a warehouse in PD that's got we have to repair leaks in the roof, or we want to make sure it's as secure as possible. We've been trying to accelerate movement of that facility to TZIP. So right now, the latest word is that the 2 new warehouses have to be constructed, and once those are completed, then we can move in. So the question now is, do we wait for them to be completed? That'll take some time to move in, and then ask USAID to come visit, or do we find an interim solution and do this? So that's where the discussion is. I think it's basically what I'd like to do is take something like fixed assets and formalize a request to them to come and see how we're doing and reconsider the special conditions. I think we need to find the solution to the warehouse if they're going to be here. We don't want them to come visit PD if they're going to come here, because that'll likely be a black mark. But if we can find that solution, get them here, it'll be the way for us to test what the standard will be that they will use to do their review, and use that to guide the rest of the areas where we want them to come in. So I would hope in the next 12 months that trigger will be pulled, hopefully sooner than later, because we don't know how long it'll take for them to mobilize. But for instance, fixed assets, we know that we need our internal audit office to give us kind of the go-ahead, and also a warehouse solution, so that we can at least say that was a big glaring issue during their last visit, that we've resolved that, and that we have a long-term solution.
So right now you're looking at anywhere beyond, anywhere beyond 12 months in terms of being able to feel some sense of certainty. I don't want to say comfortable, but some sense of certainty that you can proceed forward and possibly put in a request for.
I'd like to identify that. I think we've identified 3 candidate areas. Like I said, I think indirect costs, procurement, and fixed assets that we'd like to prioritize as areas to, and I need to sit down. We just got back, so sit down with the team and start to strategize. The key piece to me is that we have to involve our lawyers. Maybe involve the AG's office or the General Counsel with the governor as well, just to help us bring the legal mindset to this. Because when I was back at risk management, I said, I understand exactly what's going on here. However you want to talk about our warehouse or operations, etc., what we're really being guided by is the special conditions letter, which is a legal document written by their general counsel, right? And the corrective action plan, which was approved by US DOE. Those 2 governing documents should give us the path to getting out of high risk. So our job right now is to determine whether we're ready, and I think we've done a lot to get ready, and at least in those areas I think we're ready. Decide how to pull the trigger and when, and then get US DOE here so we can see actually how they're going to apply the scrutiny to determine whether we've made progress. The other good thing that we have going for us right now is that we've got a much improved audit, audit conditions. I mean, we've got 2 consecutive clean audits. We're about to release get our third audit released. we could potentially be, if we maintain the progress, be in a position where we would qualify to be a low-risk auditee except for the high-risk designation placed by US DOE. We'd like to get into that position as well so that we can argue on all sides that we are no worse than any other jurisdiction that you have out there that you're not governing, with the same high-risk designation, and you're not requiring them to have a third-party fiduciary. That's a minimum, and we think we're going to exceed that. But we want to make that argument with as much evidence as we can.
And I appreciate the update, Mr. Chairman. I think it's very important that, in fact, we and the community get an update as it applies to the high-risk status, because the people of Guam are paying $3 million a year for the services that they provide. Now, what I'd like to suggest to you, Mr. Fernandez, and to the members of the board, is please incorporate the legislature into your process, because if we're talking about the construction of 2 warehouses, that literally, if you get the different branches of government, the chief executive involved with the legislature, inclusive of the Board of Education, not a branch of government, but the entity of the Guam Department of Education, if we all get actively involved constructing 2 warehouses to meet that particular physical asset requirement, certainly it may take an additional investment on our part, but it's a $3 million savings next calendar year. Right. It's another $3 million savings the following calendar year if, in fact, we can get you off of high risk. So certainly I ask you to lean forward to the chairman and to the chair of appropriations and also to the governor's office to let's see what we can do to literally get some of these square boxes checked off so that, in fact, you can feel good and a certain sense of certainty that you can now press forward and say, okay, we're going to put in a request within 6 months of getting ourselves off of high risk and ensure that the people of Guam get to keep the $3 million here for the Department of Education and not necessarily for paying for some of these oversight entities. Another question I do have, Mr. Chairman, and this is an incident that occurred not too long ago over at Antala Middle School. And it was a situation where, in fact, some of the kids were playing and unfortunately a ball hit a scoreboard and the scoreboard fell on a couple of our students. Now, my question is, do we have a safety monitor or a safety official in each of our schools that has, in addition to his or her responsibilities, has that added responsibility of making sure that they're aware of safety issues, whether it's an electrical outlet that is protruding outside of the wall, whether it's a situation such as this where, in fact, perhaps some items are just too old and, to use our terminology, tinaki, too rusted, that they certainly pose a safety hazard, a concern to our students as well as to our school principals and our school staff. So do you have this DOE in each school, or do you have one within the central maintenance office that is tasked with the responsibility of conducting an on-site visit to all of the schools and providing them a checklist of things appear to be safe for our kids and for our school administrators as well as our teachers?
So I would say that as far as I understand, we don't have anybody in our schools who's explicit, even if it's collateral duties involved. That I know that we rely on our staff and our administrators as they see and they, because they're familiar, as even teachers, as they see issues at the school that they're concerned about, they let us know, that facilities and maintenance know what's going on. We also guide ourselves by public health standards as well. So anything that we need to look at from a public health standpoint, we've initiated our own pilot program to create, I forget what we call them, and so I need to recall it, but basically kind of our self-inspection teams where teams of staff from other schools will go and run through your public health safety checklist to see that we're meeting those minimum conditions. Whether you can foresee everything at that point or not, it just depends on how we're guided. So in that instance, there's no guarantee that they would have detected any kind of defect, which is what the issue was at Untalan. A defect that arose from the improper installation of that piece. So there isn't anybody at the school level. At the central office, we are currently interviewing for safety officer, or prepared to interview for safety officer. The only issue is we've placed that central hiring on freeze for now, but we're reviewing priority positions that we'd like to hire, and that safety officer could potentially fill that role. I think in the past, the safety officer maybe had roles involved with emergency preparedness and response. But I think that within the job description, it could also include or focus on school safety issues. And we hope that would be work hand in hand within the with the facilities and maintenance division, which would be responders.
I know, Mr. Fernandez, and to the board members, I know you're tasked with the major responsibility of overseeing 34 plus schools and 30,500 students. But to me, I would consider safety as a priority, because I mean, every beginning of the school year, you do an excellent job in terms of making sure that you visit all of these schools, that they're safe and they're ready to accept students. But we also need intermittent inspections, site inspections of all of these schools, and also the end of the school year inspection. So I certainly hope that, I understand, I mean, you said that you put the safety officer position on hold, but I would certainly encourage you to see what you can do to be able to fill that particular position, because that's a major responsibility.
Right,
And
absolutely.
whether it's identifying an additional personnel, I mean, the good chairman said, alluded to 4 school administrators in some schools, even if it's a collateral duty, that individual's collateral responsibility would be safety in the schools. At least that individual can get the training. That individual can have a different eyesight or mindset or perspective in terms of making sure that when he or she walks the grounds, that safety is always paramount in his or her mind, so that the safety of the schools, the school children, the teachers, as well as the administrators is at the forefront. So Mr. Superintendent and board members, I certainly hope that, unfortunately as a result of the last incident, but it really should be an ongoing requirement.
Great. So I appreciate that, and the board members have also, and our chair has also expressed that desire to see those critical positions move ahead. So we did a very blanket central office freeze. Now the job was to ensure that everybody justified, but the safety officer, of course, is one of those positions we'll review as critical to moving forward as priorities at the central office. But I do want to assure you, I mean, I think that we have seen a shift, as you know, in the past when we had more staff and we had responsibility for our own custodial work in-house. Every school had a set of individuals who were doing custodial work and even maintenance work at the school level. Because of we now have outsourced the custodial work, we've taken some of those support staff and made sure we divided them to other schools. And the idea was through attrition, because we've outsourced many of these responsibilities, we would no longer have those staff once they retired. But we've been reconsidering over the past couple of years, knowing that every school continues to have those needs throughout the day, when that may be easier addressed at the school level than having to call on facilities and maintenance to respond. So that's an ongoing discussion about how we staff that responsibility as well at the school site.
Thank you, Mr. Senator Hogan. I'd like to also recognize Senator Talina Nelson. She joined us on the panel. Mr. Fernandez, high risk. How many years has DOE's been on high risk? Because I know it was there when I was there. So how many years now?
Well, it's been on
12?
high risk since what, 2002? Prior to 2002, and then the third party has been there since 2010.
Okay. 6 years. First 2 years, US DOE pays for it. And you have a list of things, right, we're supposed to clean up. I would ask that we get a copy, the legislature get a copy, the committee gets a copy, and I would make sure that every senator in the legislature gets a copy. Because it kind of bothers me a little bit that, how many years? 6 years? No?
6, right?
6 times how much? 3?
2010.
$3 million? $4 million?
I think in total we're talking about $20 million of $21 million has gone to the third party since the...
$20 million, and I'm just trying to digest this, okay, Mr. Fernandez, that $20 million and the Department of Education didn't see the importance of saying it on the resolution to help us get off the high risk. We want to invest money in getting and saving us $3 million. I just don't understand that. Okay, that's one. Safety, retired Army, military, former board, military. Safety is the most important things. All we read on the paper and it's trending is riot in the schools. The kids are slipping on the hallways. Everything has to do with safety. I'm not going to blame you, Mr. Fernandez, but the board here, because this is a governing board. When I was on the board, it was a policy board. We had to pretty much convince the superintendent to do what we believe is right. But looking at a governing board, safety is not an issue. You take a look at it, because I think Ms. Gutierrez knows. I've sent her pictures I get from Senator Nelson, from every senator. There's a fight going on at the schools. So we send to each other and says, what's going on? Safety should be the highest priority. You have a contract with the SRO, it's federally funded, no? The SRO with the marshals. I spoke to the chief of police, nothing against the marshals. But I spoke to the chief of police and he says that every time there's an incident at the school, the only folks that can go in there and pull the student away is the police officer. So I'm going to ask the question, why do we continue with the marshals and not just hire the police department to come in there and help the schools? Because if the police officer is the one's going to do it, then let's get them involved in it, because I don't think they'll be as expensive, because they're going to be patrolling the area. But at least if they're assigned to the schools, they'll patrol their area and then go into the school and check if there's a riot and do what they need to do. And if the students see the police officers out there going back and forth, going in and going out, what are the chances? The beauty of having a police officer there, a squad car, is a deterrence. The first thing the kids think is, cops are around. We as adults feel that when we're driving down the road. We could be cruising, even though we're not speeding. As soon as we see a cop, the first thing a police officer is, we look at our speedometer. We look if we have our seatbelt on. I just trying to understand how safety was not. Gosh, one time when I was on the board, the safety officer was actually the Homeland Security advisor. The safety officer is the safety officer. He doesn't hang around at Agania Heights. He goes out and inspects the schools. And there was only one, and I didn't understand that. 34 schools, 36 schools, 41 schools, 4 administrators at every high school, 4 vice principals at every high school, 3 vice principals at every middle school. How many vice principals are there in the elementary? Just one? And like Senator Agustin brought up, they couldn't have been given collateral duty to be the safety administrator? It's not a big task. They walk around anyway, but I'm going to have Ms. Gutierrez speak, because she's been aching to speak. She's been signaling me, and that's my former board member here. Ms. Gutierrez, please.
Senator San Agustin, I've been waiting, because when you called me this morning, I said I'm on my way down, but I'm shaking. I have to take my medication. Anyway, good morning, Senator Nelson, Senator Will Castro, my former boss, colleague, Senator, now I have to call him Senator San Agustin. I still have a hard time. Senator Agustin and Senator Esteves. My name is Maria Gutierrez. I am the Vice Chair of the 8th Guam Education Board. And, I sit here and I listen. And I've been on the board since 1991 as a parent rep, Territorial Board of Education. Then went on to, although I have broken services, but I can say maybe that besides Mr. Ada, I'm the oldest. I took a lot of, I look at my former chairs as my mentor, and Talina, your grandmother, has taught me to stand up for the students, and that's what I'm doing now. I had the Senator San Agustin, who was a hard chair, and I would try to work with him. Okay, but I am a person that works with anyone, but I am a very strong advocate of the students and of the parents. And I know we discussed about the budget, and senators, I learned this from a college student that says, If you have just so much money, is it I want that or do I need that? So I think with the way the budget of the Department of Education, when it came to the Eighth Education Board Finance Committee under the leadership of Mr. Mark Mendiola and my colleague Mr. Lujan and myself, we look at, is it a need? Is this for the students? The priority of the Department of Education as far as the funding is for the students. And that I think every one of you, even you senators, your priority are for the students, not for anybody else. And we did a lot of I can say, scrubbing, to the point that we place a freeze on positions that we feel are not for the students. And some of them, I'll be very honest and very blunt, straight up. Some employees are not happy at central office when we said freeze or we were scrubbing. Because if it's not at the school site, and it is not a position that is a specialized position that is for the students, then we're not accommodating the students, and that's my belief. I have sidelines coming to me. Can you please consider waiving, get me out of the freeze? I said, you know, you have a superintendent. There's a proper protocol. You are coming to the wrong person. There is Mr. Fernandez. You go and justify to him if you really need that position in your division. Number two, the increase of the budget. Yes, I had stomach pain on that increase of the budget, and I saw just the other day we were given the total position, and I was like, wait a minute, I thought we scrubbed. Why is it now at 3,200 and something? There's something wrong. So I think this board and the superintendent and his team has to go back to the table again, and let's look at the priorities. You have a school at FB Leon Guerrero who has a proper enrollment of 1,100 students with 4 school aides. I'm sorry, I don't think that school can be able to work with, be able to take care of the student with 4 school aides. You know, when the budget came before us, and I know in the past it's the principals on DOE management that sits before the legislature to defend their budget. The board sits in the back. Well, thank you, Senators and Agustin, because at least you gave us this warning that we're going to be sitting before you. So, you know, at least tell me the date so I can get prepared or drink more pills, okay, my medication. But the budget came from the stakeholders, from the school. And I think when it comes from the school, and I know Mr. Mendiola is a PTO president of Agustin, it was developed by the stakeholders. And stakeholders in the school is very important. I have not taken off my hat as a parent advocate. And when they put that together, they said, this is what we need. This is not, we want this. Okay? It's a need of their students. After the budget is passed, and then the priorities are sent out. Schools are complaining as we asked for a school aid 3, we got a school aid 1. So that, to me, I think it will be a lesson for Mr. Fernandez, now that he's back, that we need, this is a more of like operational, that it be really reviewed by the management team. The 14 points, Senators, it's a local law. There's a lot in this 14 points that really need, that we will work with the legislature to amend some of these 14 points. A lot of these 14 points is a challenge to the Department of Education. I came back from the National State Board of Education 2017 Legislative Conference. I am a member on the NASB, and I'm very proud that Guam was considered to have a member on the public education positions, and it covers a lot of areas as far as those other state boards are facing. And that when it comes to this, they have amended the No Child Left Behind law. And I think that 14 points was also pattern of that. They have amended a lot of that because of the hardship in their state that they're facing because of funding. Because they have to compete for fundings. And they're surprised that we're only one public school system and nobody else compete with us. So, Senator, I assure you that my colleagues and I on the board with the superintendent that we will, and please work with us, that when we bring forth the challenges of the 14 points that you consider. Because, for example, that number 6, the air condition, remember that some of you were in school at the time when air conditioning was not required. But then when this, and I don't think any of you were sitting at the time as legislators, that when they say that air condition, it was on the 14 points. A lot of our schools are not built for air condition. So that's the hardship that the department, that's the challenges that the department are facing. I know the senator said he's questioning about the amount, or the aircon, Senator Agustin. I know that, when I did ask that, Mr. Senator, how many air conditioners were told 100. I said, I think you better justify the 100. Where is this 100 unit? That's what we were told, 100, okay? And then it comes to safety. Yes, every one of us, I personally myself, is very concerned of the safety of the students at the school. When I go to the school, I do not only go to the office to see the principal I greet the students of the staff. I go to my very popular place. And Telina, your grandmother taught me, go to the place that is very important to the students, the bathrooms. Because if you have a dirty bathroom, a stinky bathroom, those students are not going to use it. And yes, I've been known on the Department of Education, even during the policy board, that I go to the bathroom first. And I'm very concerned of the safety of the students. I walk around. And I'm sure that all my colleagues too are, and we have gone to a lot of schools, and we see the safety. Senator, you asked about the safety officer. When we were having a facility maintenance work session, and an issue about safety officer, and you're right, it was up at Homeland Security. Question we ask is, why hasn't it been filled? Why hasn't it been filled? There's no excuse. There's really, this is my own personal opinion. There was no excuse that when it was vacant, that position was not filled right away. That's a need. And the superintendent is we're waiting for the superintendent to come before the committee to justify, because I chair personnel on the committee of the board, to justify the positions that he needed that are not out of the school site. If he says, I'm going to hire a school aide, I'm going to hire a clerk for a school, we're not going to question. I need to hire a physical therapist or occupational, we're not going to question that. It's positions where we know are still double. It's not, everybody has to be multitask. You come into an office, just because you're a telephone operator doesn't mean that you cannot do something else. Okay? So we work with the superintendent on that, because he just came back March 7. Your thoughts on the textbook, Senator? Thank you for the visit. It was you that called me to go, let's go to the warehouse. I didn't even know where the warehouse is. The textbook. I can say that from the visit, they were able to open up the textbook, all those survey textbooks to the community. Before, I know it was open up to the teachers, but not really to the community. I've been there twice. I was there Monday, I went there Tuesday. I'm going there today again. So I sort of like, okay, I think this is where I'm going to focus my time. I see a lot of people from the community coming in that are not teachers. I understand that one of the housing development that has after-school program came in and got books. It should have been done before, okay? So past is past. We're going to go forward. when I open some of those books, I see the stamp, consolidated grant. That means those were, I guess, paid by federal government, federal funds, but still, should have gone out to the community. You know, I remember when I was a parent or a guardian at Timuning Elementary School on LBJ, that the principal there, Mrs. Camacho, sent a flyers to the parents and said, if you're interested of any surveyed books we have here, come before we turn it over to the warehouse. So I was able to get a lot of textbooks. So that's why it was like, there should be the community, the stakeholders, the parents should be afforded. I was told it's not in the board policy. Board policy can be changed, can be amended, can be developed, created. Then, so I just want to let you, Senator, know that, and also I just wanted to, I guess, whether and that the superintendent and his staff can make a correction on this, but I don't think the department, the U.S. DOE is mandating the department to adopt Common Core. The reason I say that is, I sat with state board members that their state don't have Common Core. In fact, they're moving away from Common Core because they're finding out a lot of issues. So I just want to make that clear, that my understanding is Common Core is not mandated in order to get federal fundings. I know that, and I wasn't on the board, Senator, but you were on the board when I think they started the Common Core. And I know that and I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, that it was supported by the administration. And so, you know, it is not a mandate. I tell you, my colleagues in the other state board of education are moving away because they're finding issues. Guam is a territory. I don't know how, you know, what's going to happen, but I don't think that they will withhold any federal funds from us. So I just want to share that, Senators, that with this 8 Guam Education Board, it's going to be a need of the student. It's not we want it, okay? And we'll go back and if we have to slash again, because when you come to certified teachers, there's that issue that a former colleague of ours on the board says, what do you mean by certified teachers? Okay? What do you mean by certified teachers? And I think the definition there, it has to be really defined, and it was never defined. And you're right, Senator, we look at the administrators of the school, right? And it's true, and I brought this up, and even my other colleagues said, if a certified teacher is not there for the, you know, for today or how many days, you have assistant school principal that should go into the classroom and take over. Because would you rather have a school aide or a substitute teacher? Remember, substitute teacher, you don't have to have any teaching background. You just go there and substitute. Okay, you follow the lesson plan of the teacher that is not there. Is go in and substitute and be that one teaching. I heard recently that there's a substitute teacher in one of the schools that has an issue, but the administration of the school did not try to help. Okay, I'll bring that up with the superintendent because it came to my ring. I remember at JFK under Gail Hendricks' principalship, and Hope Cristobal was the assistant principal. She teaches a class because they didn't have the teacher in the classroom. Whenever there's a shortage, the teacher comes, it's the assistant principal that Gail Hendricks sends out to the classroom before she asks for a substitute. So, Senators, I'll assure you that this budget, and yes, Senator Agustin, we have to, you know, the public is looking at this, the taxpayers, the Department of Education always gets, the budget is so high. And what we do is for the students. That's the need of the students. But we can go back, and I assure you that I am a member of the Finance Committee, that Mr. Mendiola, Mr. Luan, and I will go back again and scrub this and see where the need is. But I'll tell you, as far as positions, hiring personnel, right now, because we're on the FY17 budget, it's sad because we have a shortfall. But there are areas in that shortfall that should have been prevented if we were very cautious. And I think that I can, as much as I don't want to blame Michelle, but I was a member of the board when that FY17 was passed, and even Mr. Ada and Ms. Benavente, we were there, and the former chair, we were there carried over. But that's why we're doing our best now with this freezing of positions, so that we can really address the needs of the students for this fiscal year. So I thank you, and I know you're going to bring us back here for the actual budget hearing, and we want to be prepared that, I thank you, because this is really the first time that we get to sit in front of you, and I told my colleagues and I told the department, the Senator in Agustin is not going to ask you guys to be on that table. It's going to be the board. So you better have the right answer for us to respond. So thank you. Because you all have an interest in the public school system. We're only one, and I'm proud to say, as a member of the National State Board of Education, we're not the only one that has a big problem. There are other states sharing it just last March 21st with them. They said, Maria, you guys are better off than us. I said, thank you, because I know that, So thank you, Senator. I'll listen to the rest and then I'll respond. But I really thank you, and thank you for helping us out, and thank you for having us this morning. So you really know more of the department, and that's why I tell people, do not panic. What the senators want to know is how the department is operating, and so that when we come before the budget, they would understand. You guys would understand. Some of you have been in the system, and the senator there. Some of this blame, I will point it back to him. But it's because we're in the same board. And then just going to the third party, okay, Senator. And I want to make this clear on record. And here's my colleague, Mr. Mendiola and Mr. Lujan. We had a work session, and Mr. Fernandez was not back yet, with the staff on high risk. We wanted the high risk people to be, the third party people to be there. They refused to come. They refused to come. We were not happy about it. So we're waiting for, I know that the contract is between the superintendent and the third party, but I do have some concern when the US DOE comes, because we should be off the high risk. We should be. We're accommodating them with, they need this position in order to be off high risk, but up to now, we're still. And that's the concern of the public too, is we're paying so much. That money should go into the school. So, si Diyos Masi, buenos dias.
Thank you, Ms. Gutierrez. I'd like to recognize Senor Ben Meno, former board member of the Guam Education Board. Sir, thank you for being here today. I'd like to give it back to, you want to make a comment? I like Ms. Gutierrez. She's been around. And she was nervous this morning. She called me up twice. And I tried to find a way to end the conversation so I could meet with the chairman this morning. But I'd like to give the, as a matter of fact, I see some of you twitching on your chairs. What do we call a 5-minute? A 5-minute break, and then we'll start back up. It's 10:52 right now. At least we'll make it 8 minutes. 11 o'clock, we'll start back up, and then we'll finish it off. It won't be much longer. All right? Thank you. We're at a recess at this time. Yep. board members, Superintendent? We'll give it 1 minute so he can finish his interview. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start now and continue. I guess that was the magic word for PDN and the post to step away a little bit. But, ladies and gentlemen, it's 11:07. We'll just continue on. The areas I wanted to, before I ask Senator Steves and Senator Will, and I know Senator Tarina Nelson will be coming right back, because we do have a official visit from DC, but my concentration is you folks, the students. Going down just a little, this is going to be real quick, but hopefully it won't be any longer, because if it is, then I'll ask Superintendent to be the one to treat you guys, because that's his community, that's his group of folks, so, and he's like, you're right. But anyway, moving down, we got number 11, libraries which meet the standards. We got 4 million. How much does the school get, does DOE get from the passport office? How much money is allocated to you folks? Because you know, passport, 50% of the money that when you come in to do your passport goes to DOE. How much does DOE get anyway for that?
In FY17, it's $907,000, $907,668 were appropriated.
Oh, 900. Wow,
That's from the passport fund.
that's hardly anything. It's only about a quarter of what you need. Because, you know, I've seen some of the schools, their libraries, they're struggling. And I got to give them credit for the librarians because they've done a lot of work. And they've done great work, actually. Some of the libraries actually look a lot better than most places I've been to, even in the mainland. And then we moved on real quick. Health, safety, sanitary, learning environment. What is that talking about? Is that talking about the construction of the schools? Okay. And that's why I go back, board member, superintendent, even though the law is 14 points, you need to maybe change the resolution the way it's presented to us so that all the other senators can understand really what you all are facing or what our children are facing. Because this is not a snapshot. Okay? Going down, we got at number 13, we got 53 million for at least 180 instructional days. I'm very concerned because I think at one time Senator Rory's issue brought up to convert it. I'm getting ready to introduce a bill to convert it. The 180 days would be 1,080 hours of classroom, so that when you have an event that disrupts the school, you're not saying you need to make up a whole day. No, maybe you need to make up 4 hours or 3 hours or whatever number of hours, and then the board, the superintendent, the schools figure it out, work it out with the stakeholders, and do the makeup. Because when we talk 180 days, we have to realize that towards the end of the school year, in the high schools more so, there's maybe about a week of getting ready to graduate, or 2 weeks. There's no instructional days there. Okay, so, and you all will agree to that, okay? I know that. And I don't want the board or the school to say, we do have 180 days. No, it's more like 170, 173, something like that. But if you have the conversion of 1,080 hours, and the reason why I say 1,080, because it's 6 times 180 gives you 1,080. Am I correct? I mean, maybe my math may be wrong, but it's not often. I like, you see how Taring laughs, because she remembers when I was on the board. And then we go down to, that's something to consider. If you like that, please don't hesitate to write a letter. It helps me justify when I submit the bill. Okay? Regular timely school bus transportation. I asked that question of the management. It's not about DPW because you don't pay for school buses. The timely, that's DPW again. The 548,000 is about replacing school buses.
It's the special education buses that we do.
Right, and that's what I was going to lead to. It's about getting buses for special ed. But isn't that federally funded?
Yeah, partially.
Partial. Okay. I wish Art, who's that, Ike was here, so I can ask him to justify how come he's got so many people and he should get more buses instead of people, you know, in his office. I mean, that's something to consider, Mr. Superintendent. I don't know how big the federal programs office needs to be, while the rest of the deputy superintendent's office are not getting any bigger and are struggling to work with the numbers they got to deal with. Am I correct, Joe, Erica? I think you guys maybe should be able to figure out a way how to convince Mr. Fernandez to give you some of the federal programs, folks, so they can write grants for the individual schools. Because if I'm correct, the schools can write individual grants. They don't have to go to Ike for everything. They can write and request for grants. If I'm correct, some of the schools have done that. The individual teachers have done that, and they're getting money for their schools, and it's working great. So it just makes me wonder, do you really need a federal program? That's for you guys to figure out. Do you really need a federal programs office? Or do you need a federal programs coordinator only and have the different program coordinator? Because that's what a program coordinator is, right? The person that sits down, writes the grants, makes sure the grants are being fulfilled, makes sure the money comes in, right? Right. And that's something that the superintendent, the board needs to take a look, because I remind the board, you're a governing board. When I was there, we were a policy board. We beat up the policy and hope for something new. As governing board, you work as a team. You fix it. Like Mr. Meno told me outside when we took a break, he showed me a shirt that says, just do it. And that's what I'll say to you folks. Just do what you need to do. And if you have issues you want to present, feel free to write the letter, request for the adjustment. I'm going to ask now Senator Stevens and then Senator Nelson. They would like to have some questions. So we'll start with Senator Stevens.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Chairman, good morning. Now, you've alluded to a couple of things, Mr. Fernandez, that, I'm happy to hear really the updating and ongoing application of standard operating procedures within your organization, which leads to something that's very important, and especially when I look at budgets and how we move forward with different initiatives, are performance metrics and how you measure performance and grade them. While I know it's not really possible to do with Department of Education because of the scope that you have and the responsibility that you have and our limitations in options, I don't think that we can go with performance-based budgeting. But I do ask, are you evaluating certain initiatives and programs within your organization to ensure that you're operating at peak efficiency? And I'll ask you, at least initially, before the next budget hearing, actually the actual budget hearing comes up, can you say with certainty that you're operating at 100% efficiency with the resources that you have? For example, are the employees and people in certain positions being maximized for what it is that they can do? Or do they potentially hold a position with a limited responsibility which requires maybe 2 hours of work out of the day, or potentially an ebb and flow type thing where they have a large workload and they sit for a good majority of the time? And again, I ask this from an operational sense because anytime there's a request for more funding, I want to ensure that the funding that's already being given is being maximized and being used to the fullest extent. And I have other questions, but I'll let you reply to that first.
I'll say that I do not have any adopted performance metrics per se, as you're describing, and I think it's a great discussion to have, especially around the operational pieces. So the reason I'll start with that is because it is probably a good time to start looking at those pieces. If you look at, for instance, our business office employees, we've undertaken a shift, right, from a very outdated financial management system to one that's more user-friendly. And I think the focus has always been to, as you adopt a new platform, is to bring your employees to a point where they're going to be productive on a new platform. A lot of training has had to happen, a lot of development, a lot of growth. And I believe, I don't know that we've established a particular metrics, but that's been the biggest effort on the business side. If you look at our facilities and maintenance division and other divisions sort of associated with it, we've moved from insourcing to outsourcing, right? So you can see how, for instance, if you were running a shop that was heavy on skilled labor and trade helpers, because you're basically trying to do all the fixes yourselves, but now you're moving towards contract management where you're responsible for overseeing AC. It's a different skill set that we've got to either develop our people to be able to do effectively, or to change the nature of the people, of the positions that we're hiring, or so forth. So we're kind of in that stage right now where we're seeing, like on the contract management piece, a real need to step up our ability to be effective managers of these outsourced services versus what we used to do before, which is we're the ones who are cooking, we're the ones who are cleaning, and all of that. So I kind of think that we've kind of made that transition. Now, my focus has been, and my focus will continue to be, how do we, given those shifts, and given our what I would describe as the department as being a learning community, how do we ensure, on the one hand, that we provide some opportunities for professional development and growth to all of our employees, so we can feel that we have an assurance that we are promoting their development to be able to function not just at an efficient level, but the highest productivity. I guess they're related, right? Efficiency and productivity, to maximize their productivity. But that of course begs the question: how then are you going to evaluate that performance? So I feel just kind of having this conversation off the cuff, it's kind of, we've made these big transitions from in-source to outsource, from an older, outdated management system to a more efficient management system, less paper-based, more automated financial management system. So the question you ask is, if it takes less time to process this procurement because you're basically attaching everything electronically and not driving downtown or back and forth to trade paper, are we making the best use of our time, now that we have that added efficiency? And that's, I don't know the answer to that, but that's something.
And I guess you kind of hit on a couple of points, is how our performance metrics generated, and I think a lot of that is done initially on paper. When you develop the guidelines in terms of standard operating procedures and the things that actually happen when we look at it from A to Z, and compare that to the job descriptions and then also bigger, larger objectives which determine our staffing pattern, then I think based off what we should see product-wise or in terms of productivity will kind of determine whether we're meeting the measurements of what it is we're supposed to do. So, this in relation to what Senator San Agustin brought up, questions like, do we need an entire office for federal programs? Is that something that we reevaluate? Are there policies, internal policies in place in which we reevaluate? Is this something we need to do? Or is it on a different measure depending on what programs are out there? So if we look at cutbacks in terms of federal programs that are out there and how they're managed, do we need the same amount of staff? So are we addressing the ebb and flow of government as it is? And then I'm aware, it was brought to my attention of a program that was instituted within GDOE, whereas an administrator would follow a certain class or grade within a school throughout their progression throughout the DOE school system. From what I understanding, that program hasn't really worked out the way it was planned to. And what I'm curious about is in terms of the vacancies or the staffing patterns that identified for these administrator level positions in a program that's not even being utilized, or we have no metrics of whether it's effective or not. Are we overspending in terms of the personnel into a program we're not even executing? That would be my next.
So let me start with the first point. As I mentioned, with regard to performance-based metrics, I do want to say that you're right. As we've established and we update our SOPs, and as we implement and revisit them, one of the most effective, I think, initiatives that we've done over the past few years has really been to build out our audit office, because we're such a big organization. We only had 2 people who would oversee just particular areas like non-appropriated funds, and we didn't have the capacity to deal with things like high risk. When we're talking about updating SOPs and you're updating the system with regard to procurement, how are we going to test those? Other accounting, fixed assets, all of those. So I think that's where we are. The other piece that you mentioned, though, is going to take it's a much broader effort. And I think probably the issue here is bandwidth. How much bandwidth do we have to tackle some of these important issues? Because, for instance, you asked, does this all align? Does this start with the job descriptions? Well, we're working, to be frank, with some job descriptions that were created in the 1970s. So you've hired a computer operator based on a clerk or an administrative staff based on a 1970s job description before the advent of computers. A lot of what you require of this employee is captured in the collateral duties line, right? And other collateral duties is assigned because at that point it really wasn't envisioned some of the responsibilities and duties that you see today. So, updating that. Now, of course, we utilize, the approved job descriptions with the CSC and so forth, and they apply across government. But what's the difference between a program coordinator in one, office versus another? Those types of things do need to be revisited, because in essence, as in government, in a bureaucracy, some of these positions are seen as interchangeable, and when in fact, depending on the area in which they're assigned, their duties should reflect a more modern work setting and may have to be more specialized, right? And the other thing is, if you look at that, our personnel needs, we have a, this, I think we end up having a gap where you have a lot of these jobs coming up from the lower levels, a big gap in middle management, and then you have your director levels and so forth. So even looking at the HR structure as a whole, you want to build these job descriptions to reflect the current expectations of the workplace in a more modern setting. You want to build a career path so that people have an opportunity to improve and then be promoted and all of that. And there's a lot of things that, again, you need bandwidth to really focus on and fix, but it is a challenge that you raised that I think it's, it's worth looking at. Now, the issue with the middle school concept, you're right that it has been implemented in the middle schools. It's been difficult to implement in schools with low student populations. So that's been the challenge, because if you go through a budget process like this, when you talk about want and need and how do you justify it, well, if you're trying to fully implement the middle school concept, then you would basically have sufficient number of assistant principals to follow the grade and then the administrator of that middle school. But when you come down to this process, they don't always rise to the top, because the other pushback is, well, you're only running a school of this size, in a smaller school, and therefore other priorities kind of tend to creep up over them. So that's been the challenge in terms of that issue, implementing the middle school concept.
And I think that's where the question comes up when reestablishing that want and need. If we're if the Department of Education is in a position where, based on current financing or the current financial situation, that they can't fully fund this to be effective, then maybe with something either in communication with us, I would encourage you to please sell me on this concept and why it's so beneficial so we can properly fund it. Or I would say, let's withdraw from this initiative altogether and prioritize that funding into things that the stakeholders, as you say, would find as a necessity. And I only bring this up is because in my speaking with teachers, parents, and other constituents, is there was a concern. There were too many chiefs, and there's too much administration when there are a lack of teachers, lack of school aides, and lack of a lot of lower level necessities that actually have a direct impact on the students. And so again, that's why I'm very cautious whenever the term comes up for additional appropriation, just ensuring that what resources are given now is being maximized and prioritized. And again, I think you're doing a great job, and with the SOPs and operational side, the way you explained it, it seems like you're moving in the right direction. But the priority of that and how that moves forward and getting that done has a direct reflection on operational savings that we can identify clear-cut in black and white, how we can save money operationally so we can apply that money towards direct access and direct benefit to the students. Now, the other thing I'd like to bring up, again, this could potentially go with the wants and needs, but I'm of the mindset that all students require whatever they need for the proper education, but there is a special population group within Department of Education that's been fully integrated, and those are the special needs students. I know this has been brought up before, and it's something that's always been very personal to me, is the one-to-one program and the potential of classifying those individuals. Again, to address this, it's not an easy job, and it doesn't just take, not anyone can do it. At least if you want the child to benefit, it's not a job we can just take somebody off the street in an unclassified position and throw them in there. The type of compassion and the type of character you need for that is equivalent to a nurse, and those individuals are hard to come by. And I know there's a turnaround rate for them. And again, the studies show that consistency and continuity with these special needs individuals within the school system is very important and conducive to a good education, and that which is going to systemically affect the rest of their lives. And I don't hear it addressed much. And again, I'm not saying that you haven't addressed it or looked into it, but this being our first, I guess, contact in discussing this and funding, I'd like to bring that to your attention as well.
You're absolutely right, and I think that's why we're here, because you made reference to efficiencies and too many chiefs versus too many people in the classroom, vacancies in the classroom, not enough supplies, because we're in an environment of, I think, I mean, again, let me just say, we would love anyone's assistance in being more efficient. So bring outside eyes in, do it internally, trying to be more efficient with the resources that we have. But my experience with the employees and of the department and the families they serve is that we're typically in a position of having to say no across the board. I mean, at the same time that we're building and we're layering on expectations, right? So we raise the expectations of teachers, we raise the expectations of administrators, we raise the expectations of our staff. I wanted to use this opportunity to just clarify one thing. For instance, we talked about school safety officers. I just clarified. I didn't, have the full details, but what we do have are school safety liaisons. Now, they're not hired as a school safety liaison. We just built in a collateral duty to an existing school staff who volunteered or was assigned to be in that role of having those periodic on-site checks of the facility based on, trained to be able to do that in accordance with public health standards. And then teams of those school safety liaisons will periodically go to other schools to do that, that outside inspection to ensure that we have findings that we can then forward to facilities and maintenance to address to meet those standards. But again, we're in a situation where I was asked by a reporter, so is that a specific position? It's a staff member who stepped up or has been assigned to take on additional duties with no extra pay. It's just like you said, collateral duties as assigned. So same thing with administrators. As we go towards a standard-based system, and we want our administrators to be more instructionally focused, at the same time we want them to make sure our kids are safe. We layer on these expectations, but we always struggle with the fact that we also know that some of them are certified teachers. Should we reduce the administrative complement and move them into full-time classroom positions or not? That's an ongoing discussion that we have. So a lot of it is with scarce resources, trying to pull and push and pull and figure out, do we just stop the central office hiring and just focus on completing the schools? Those kinds of discussions you've heard the board echo. Same thing with the aides, the one-to-one aides. I completely agree with you, and we had this discussion actually about a year ago. And the issue is this. If you're in a part-time position, you're looking for a full-time position. You're hoping for a full-time position because you need to pay your bills, you need to take care of your family, and so forth. So when we hire part-time one-to-one aides, because to handle our most vulnerable students and to be their caregivers and guides in the school system, it raises all of those issues. How are we, we have part-time one-to-one aides in the most complicated, sometimes most demanding positions, and the minute a full-time position opens, they want to move out. So you see that turnover. Now, the only issue that we have, and this is a discussion that the chairman is really taking the lead on, trying to figure out how we can move towards more full-time support, is a function of resources. So let's say we have 2,000 students with IEPs. How do we ensure that every student has an aide to support, if the aide is required in their IEP? How do we ensure that? Well, these are fully funded with SPED resources. So using and trying to maximize SPED resources, you either had 2,000 part-time or you reduce it by whatever the math says to 1,200 or whatever full-time, and then you leave 800 students out without that assistance, right? You can do a lot of scrubbing to say, well, how many of them really need aid, and can we transition some out? And you can do that, and that's an effort that needs to continue with the parents and the schools. Now we're in a position where SPED resources are not sufficient to cover. So now we've come to the legislature to ask for an additional, it's in there's about 79 additional aides that would be special education aides. Now, we would have to hire them as full-time because we don't hire them part-time on the local budget. So they would be full-time, and then a portion would still be handled with, with the SPED funding, but federal funds. But those who hire locally would then be, full-time. And we have to face this issue of, are we going to have full-time one-to-ones as well as part-time one-to-ones, and how do we deal with those inconsistencies? But it's a function of resources because, the difficulty for us is saying, yes, if it's a part-time position, this person justifiably is going to look for a more stable position when it opens up. And we've seen that happen. The minute there's something that's available, they turn over and you leave a child without that consistent aid presence.
And I bring this up is just kind of open the doors as you said is cross training or collateral duties. And there shouldn't be any reasons if you set the bar in the terms of the job description and hiring requirements for, let's say, these SPED one-to-one individuals, and let's say, okay, well, we could utilize them in a part-time position. We could utilize them in a full-time position, but not all for their specified purpose. And we get into that same position to what are we paying them for? But again, I think when you specify some of the hiring requirements on there, or apply and build a training program for there to, even if it starts at an entry level, there shouldn't be any reason why you couldn't train these individuals to be some of the safety inspectors. I think if you're going down a checklist, you don't necessarily need to have a degree in English or be a certified teacher to be able to run through these checklists, or also act and even having that additional personnel to act as either aides. So if we look at it, and like you said, career development and career progression, right. I think I spoke with a one-to-one aide that didn't even know about the Teacher Corps program. And so maybe this is something that we can look at. Come in at an entry-level position as a one-to-one aide. Get familiar with the operations of the Department of Education. Here are some career path choices that we can assist you with, so potentially you can either be a future educator or program administrator. And so when we look at that kind of that continuity of keeping that experience and talent within an organization, I think it's going to be beneficial. But having them in a full-time position and then building those career paths for individuals even outside the Corps of Teachers that can maybe progress or grow into those things, I think is going to provide a lot of continuity within the organization. And I'm just throwing that idea out there as ways that we can look at these being beneficial. Now, I haven't completely gone through your budget. Will I find in there, I guess, an outline or program outline of what the specified cost would be to get us to full funding of the SPED program and with one-to-one aides, and then with additional alternatives and courses of actions with either the full-time or an increase of the part-time structure?
Well, the costs
Would I find that in there?
The costs are built into the budget, and the 79. Yeah. But what we'll do is make sure that we either identify it so that you can pull it out of the budget or provide that in a separate communication to the committee.
Thank you, because I understand the format, and sometimes it's just a big number at the end of the day when I look at. But when you put it into perspectives of how it's going to directly benefit the faculty or the students, then it's a little bit easier to understand the narrative when I vote to appropriate either the same, less, or more. So those things would help. I would greatly appreciate that. I think that was the last thing I had. Again, I thank you guys for being here, and I'm always willing to work with you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Stevens. Now I have Senator Nelson. She's going to ask a few questions. They normally always start with a few, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. All right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank DOE for all the hard work that they've done, really helping our children, especially Mr. Sanchez and Mr. Anderson, for really holding down the fort in the most trying of times. So great job at that, and thank you for your hard work and stepping up to the plate. Also, I'd like to thank the teachers and the staff, the aides, and everyone else that supports DOE's mission and vision. Thank you for your hard work. I know it is not easy. And so truly, sincerely, I appreciate it, and I'm very grateful. Mr. Fernandez, this is just some questions for you, and my concern is more of a human perspective, because when we really get down to the education, it's really the children that is our primary focus, and their safety and their well-being. And thank you, Mrs. Gutierrez, also for emphasizing that. You know that I was a teacher under your purview, and one of the biggest challenges that I saw with a social aspect was that there were suicides happening in our schools. There was drug abuse and alcohol abuse in our schools. And it's very challenging for DOE because of the limited resources of funding. So I wanted to know that, do you have a plan, and this is probably just a yes or no question, I don't want to take a lot of your time, or have you looked at creative ways and creative avenues to involve the community in addressing these specific issues?
Yes.
Okay, now you can explain.
Now,
Because I don't want you to smoke and mirror me in awe.
No,
I just want to
mean,
make sure
it's
that
a-
it's something concrete.
It's a great question, because and it goes back to the way you thanked DOE for all it does for our kids as a department. And the reason why it's important to do that is to also recognize that DOE often does things that go beyond what you would normally think would happen in the classroom, where we're just supposed to teach, we're just supposed to work. We now are trying to regulate issues relating to students fighting off campus. We're trying to deal with...
So what are you doing
Yeah.
for the fighting off
So-
campus?
So for the fighting off campus, basically we could have taken one of two approaches, right? One was to say it's off campus. It's not our jurisdiction.
Okay.
The other has been the harder one, to identify, use all the social media, work with our law enforcement agencies to have our administrators, instead of saying forget it, it's not our responsibility, it happened outside, to identify all those kids, to pull those parents in, and to impose disciplinary action for matters that typically wouldn't have been under their purview.
And what kind of disciplinary action do you...
They can be suspended, they can be expelled as if it happened on a school campus, right? So if you're caught fighting, if you're caught encouraging, if you're caught organizing, you are still subject to the same disciplinary rules as if you were on campus. So
Has there been any data that supports that this approach is effective?
well, I don't know that the data would have to be whether taking action or not taking action has an impact. Because,
Well, not in the matter
Yeah.
of taking action and
Right.
not taking action. It's the specific action taken. Is it an effective approach, or do you need to address another approach?
I'm not sure what you're asking. What I'm saying is that
I'm asking
the same disciplinary rules that apply in a school setting
Okay.
are now being applied to situations off campus by voluntary extension of our authority.
Okay, so I'm asking if this approach of bringing the parents in, parent shadowing, suspension, is there data that shows that this method is effective?
We can show data with regard to disciplinary offenses, and those who are addressed and are not repeat offenders are considered to be I guess we'll say successful if they're not repeating offenders. And there are those that we deal with who are going to be repeat offenders, who are showing trends of violence, assault, bullying. Those offenders are going to be harder to deal with, and those are the ones that are more problematic for our schools.
So what do you do to help them?
So I think there's a
Other
couple
than
of things.
suspension? and
Oh,
stuff
no,
like-
I don't support just the automatic suspension expulsion, even though it's very difficult for our schools to deal with some of those issues. So, we used to have a school called J.P. Torres Academy, where we would send a lot of our behavioral problems, and our kids who would go there for things like you're talking about, drug and alcohol abuse as part of their issues, other issues that could be related to mental health. But at J.P. Torres, we stopped that because we didn't have any drug and alcohol support. Counseling for them and so forth. We weren't really interceding in a way that would allow them to come productively back into the classroom. So we said, look, we're going to have J.P. Torres turn into a school where those students who have been failing for academic and behavioral issues have a chance to graduate. Now that's put more pressure on the schools to
Right.
deal with those who are not given that avenue and are on campus and are causing issues. We've reinforced to the schools that you can still use the expulsion and suspension, your disciplinary tools, to address them. So there's not like we're going softer on offenders. You can still use that. You just got to make sure you're applying the right policies and procedures to do that. We
I guess
have
what I'm trying to
started-
say, Mr. Fernandez, or what I'm trying to come to is that perhaps some of the policies need to be relooked in that retrospect
Absolutely.
and see if we can help these children.
I
Right?
believe-
Truly help them, not just say, make your parents deal with it. I know it's a challenge.
Right.
And I know the kind of, I understand the diversity in the community.
Right.
And some of the challenges that come with it, the cultural challenges and everything like that. But I encourage you to look for serious solutions and approach that you can collect data to show that it is effective. I don't want to take too much of
Well,
your
if-
time, so I wanted to ask just
Well,
one more
if
question.
I may, Senator, because I'm missing a big point that I did want to bring up, which is what we are doing on that side of the issue.
Okay.
The only reason I was stating that is because sometimes we get criticized for, at least under my term, for going soft on offenders because we are now looking at alternate ways to get them to graduate and not be expelled and suspended at such high rates, or applying our policies incorrectly to have them dropped out of school.
Right.
So, but on the other hand, how we deal with the students who are in need of other types of interventions is harder. Now, what we've initiated over the past year,
Yes, I saw that.
it was kind of limited, but we've started
Yes.
with Nadine Tate, our district psychologist, trying to build some foundation for school-based mental health services for
Yes.
students in need. That's hard to do because we're limited. I mean, we're building it. We
Yeah.
need the help of other agencies. We need the help of other partners to do so. But again, it's one of those issues where it's your collateral, your collateral duty now involves not just being a counselor at your school, but being trained to also provide mental health services.
Yes, yes,
So it's
yes.
things like that. The drug and alcohol abuse program that we've launched in some of our schools at the initiative of the same team is also something. But the issue is starting, and it's such small scale that we.
Right,
it's
right.
hard
So
to do.
yes, you do a pilot, and then perhaps you can also provide training, right, to teachers and administrators continually, because every issue is different, and sometimes they handle it differently. And I don't want to. I'll get with you offline, and I'll discuss
Okay,
that with you more in
absolutely.
person. But I don't want to hold up. Okay, and then also I'd like to, if you could really take a look at the food quality given to our students, especially, I mean, I understand the free lunch program, so let's just give them hot dogs and deal with it. No, please take a look at that and help them. And also the teachers, they need to be compensated for their supply, the money that they put in the beginning of the classroom, towards the middle of the classroom. And also, like Senator Fernando Esteves said, also to implement something where you can progress as an aide or a one-to-one within the structure. It's nothing new. It's been done before in the past.
Right.
Mrs. Gutierrez is familiar with it too. So if you could also look into that, and then include this in your budget, right? This approach, this is all. That's why these questions are here, because it's germane to the budget. Okay, and then we'll make sure we make that Mr. Chair gets you a majority of that money. That
So if I could, So if I could respond to a couple of those things, food service, yes.
Please improve it.
Yes, we need to
You
improve
have
work.
the authority to improve it. Please improve it.
Right. So there's that. The other issue, though, with regard to what you've
They're
raised.
feeding the kids practically pig slop.
Yeah.
Yeah, so please improve it.
So the other issue, I think, the other issue I would raise with regard to training of teachers and completely on board. I mean, that the issue there is we want our employees to be to feel valued at work, to have an opportunity to progress and so forth. And I was going to say to Senator Esteves, part-time one-to-one aides, school aide ones who've been in a position for 15, 16 years.
Yes.
One of what are we doing is that's a good question, and how do we get to make change?
Yes.
Now, the other thing about the training for teachers, this is something that's really important right now. Number one, we can always train, and we've done a lot of training. It's almost so much training going on.
Sometimes the training is not relevant sometimes, though.
Exactly. Well, that's what I'm
Okay.
saying. Exactly. There's
So
a
it has
lot
to
of
be
training
vetted.
going on that I think, one of the biggest things that I've realized over my time away has been this, is that in order to have a resilient organization, we've got to find a way to deal with our teacher workforce, which is, we're short teachers. How do we recruit teachers who want to be educators and do it for the long term? How do we retain them through professional development and growth and giving them value in their career? And how do we ensure that, we
Yes.
have, that is a piece that we need to think about right now, because like you're saying,
Yes. And I'm
Exactly.
sure that's why you're here, because you're going to work on those issues and make it happen.
no, and I've spoken to my team, and we just
Okay.
yesterday we said things like this: what is important for teacher retention? Yes, it could be training, professional development, and growth, but we also said, how about instructional materials and supplies? How about giving them the tools they need to work
Right.
in the classroom? Because what you're saying is, there are, yes, they are going out of pocket.
Yes.
They're working all weekend, they're working all night, but things like that, like how
Maybe
do
pay
we,
them for an extra prep period.
extra prep period, try to compensate them in many ways
Yes.
that values their role, and because I think right now, I'm so worried about the
Because
fact
even
that
after
we
they
can't-
leave the school, they're still working.
And we can't find enough teachers to fill all our classrooms at this point. So that's the biggest challenge I think that we have to face in
Okay.
addition to other.
Thank you,
some
Mr.
other-
Fernandez. I look forward to those solutions.
Senator Nelson,
Yes, sir.
you brought up a very interesting topic, which is very dear to me. And you asked, and we need to give credit where credit is due. There was a program that your grandmother implemented, and it's still very active as we speak today. You all know where I am currently employed. The recipients, much of my recipients are from DOE. Mrs. Erica Cruz, about a year and a half ago, because we called in for, open discussion, she implemented back what your grandmother had started, which was the opportunity room. And let me be proud to say that that's in the middle school, okay? But the ones that I have right now that are in the middle school up at my facility, those are your probation kids having problems. And we also have our high school, so we have those problems. But let me tell you an interesting scenario, Senator Esteves, and I brought this up to the Attorney General's office. You go to any store right now, and behind anywhere there's a cabinet. Guess what's behind the inside that cabinet? The lemon. Guess what's outside of that cabinet? Vodka. I brought that to the attention of the Attorney General. And so they're looking into this. And I would ask the kids, as they exit my facility, I would ask them, by the way, where do you get it? Oh, we just go to the store, pull it. We pay for it. There. That's one of the problems. You recently read in the paper where kids would hide at FB Leon Guerrero in the bushes. They would even jump the fence. Guess where they go? Across the street in the boonies, under some covers, the vodka is there. So between the Department of Education, Public Works, and DOE, we're working out to clear that, because that's Chamorro Land Trust property, and get that open area. I don't know whether that has been completed, but that's going to be one of our major projects. But just thought I'll share that information with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Etta. Thank you for your concrete answers. I appreciate that. And just to share, I was also a teacher in the opportunity room, so I understand the diversity and complexity that those teachers deal with as well. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. You know, as Senator Nelson, or as the superintendent brought up the policies, I remind the board members here, that's your role. Okay, so make sure you take a look at the policies that you've got. There are a number of them. I've seen them. It'll take forever to fix it all. But at least when a policy is being addressed at the legislature, look for it, find it, fix it, so we know there's movement. Otherwise, like Senator Nelson brought up, what are you going to do? Look at your policy, because when the budget comes up, that's what we're going to be watching out for. Senator Davis has He says one more question,
No,
and he says it's short.
it's more of a quick statement, and just to see about kind of where the board is now in terms of policy and direction and the mission. When addressing a lot of the issues now, we look at and have to address the generational change. And so I ask this, and I guess maybe perhaps Mr. Fernandez can answer this as some insight as to the policy direction of the board. Very simply put, in your belief, where does education begin? Yes.
Is that for him?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the answer, Mr. Ada said it was at home and in the community.
Yes. And now when we look at education as a community responsibility, who would you believe is ultimately responsible for the education of the child?
The parents?
And I completely agree. And I think important statements or mission statements in how we identify those things and engaging with the community is to, I believe, in my humble opinion, not being an educator, but having been a product of the public school system, is that we need to push this more. When you're looking at the new generation of parents with students in school, they don't understand that. There's an expectation that once you just drop your kid off to school, that they should come back educated, and it's the government's fault if the kid's not. But until I think Department of Education comes out with a apolitical stance, it says, no, you have a responsibility first. And then we have a responsibility second. I think we'll start seeing some more dramatic change. Because if there's one thing that I believe is true, that if the parent doesn't support educational initiatives, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at that, the child is not going to be educated. And so I wanted to leave on that note, and I think as a matter of policy and the direction of DOE, it's just in my humblest opinion that we look at that just as a matter of policy and education for both the children and the parents, and as a community aspect of accountability of the education of our community, that we might look at that in moving forward. Thank you.
Can I respond to
Yes,
Senator Davis? First, I would like to make for the public and the record, okay, that so nobody says conflict of interest. Senator Davis is my nephew, and Senator Castro is my nephew too. Okay, so for the record, very close related. Okay, Senator Davis, the question about where education here is the home, and the responsible is the parents, but as a parent who's really behind to support education, I believe that the school and the parents have to be partner, and that the parents have to make welcome when they come into the school, regardless if their child is the problem student. And I say that from an experience as a parent. And I think that's what got me so involved in education, because my kids are not perfect. They're not saints. I was at a middle school, Binabenti Middle School, which they did at the time. I was there every day. I was at Wedding Hill every day. Why? Because my son has this attitude that I want to show myself as the mature of the school. But I asked the school, meet me halfway, so that we can resolve the problem. And I don't blame the school. I had to get to the point when I even asked the principal at JFK to give my son a detail, not in the office, out in the hot sun. Not any other, go to the cafeteria and help serve get the tray where the student, his classmate can say, hey man, he learned from that. So I think this is a partnership between the school and the parents. Some parents are not as vocal as Maria Gutierrez. I've been to a school where I stand there and a parent still stands there waiting and waiting. And some of the parents, the English is their second language, and sometimes they're afraid to make noise. So I think there is this partnership that has to be together. I know a former, there was a mayor that says, oh, because of this happening at FB, it's the parents. No, we need to be partner. That's why as soon as there's a mark on that student or a rate, like my colleague Mark Mendola said, radar, call in the parents. Let's see how can we solve this. I was at DOE office when I was standing there, now that I'm trying to hear everything that's being said, where a parent called in and said, why should I be asked to shadow my kid? It's the school's job. Why should I be shadowed? So to me, even if I'm a parent advocate, I look at that as, would you rather have your child be suspended than be given this opportunity that you come in and shadow your child, right? So there's a lot of work that the department also have to work on, and the parents. And I know that Senator San Agustin, when the one that happened up at FB, and that was not new. They used to call them the outgaters. Same place, same gate, the fence, the outgaters. So when those parents were trying, or the school was trying also to reach the parents, it was like, because I guess with their limited English, they sort of not, stay back. But so to me, this is a work that is ongoing with the department. And I have been approached by parents that, they're suspending my child. I said, then what, did you go to the school? No. Then you can need to go in, because there's always two sides to the story. There's always two sides, and that's me. My child comes home and said, that teacher said, no, we're going to meet tomorrow. No, I don't. Oh, okay, that means you're the one at fault. So, there's a lot of work. And yes, Senator Nelson, really, that opportunity room came from your grandmother. And it was very helpful in the middle school, because the learning continues. I put my son there one day, and for a week, and when I used to follow Senator Uggan when he was a staff with Congresswoman Bordalio when she was a senator. I would go to the school, and we were in the Dedido area. Said, "Can we go to Dedido Middle?" Then went in, we signed in, and Speaker Wampai was the principal. I said, "Can we go to the opportunity room?" Because you know why? My son was in there, and I wanted to show them. And it helped a lot of kids. So I know that there's some concerns from the schools. Why do we have to have the opportunity room? We don't need this, we don't need that. We're mixing those kids with the other kids. Because before it used to be JP Torres, right? So when the superintendent came in and he shared this with me, when he was speaking, talking to all the students that were there, they said, "What was the reason you're here?" I said, "Oh, because of my uniform, school uniform." Or it was just, this and that. So I guess he found out that, we don't just throw kids over there. We need to have an intervention. We need to have a program. There were people that are asking, what happened to the straight program that was at one time? I don't know if any of you are in school and they're having that. Just scare something. Yeah. So this thing about responsibility and where does it start? Yes, it starts at home, because when that child is born, you start, and I'll tell you, this new generation, it's really hard now, because even my own, sometimes before, when we were growing up, if anybody in the street tell us, "Hey, shape up," okay. Now, you don't have to be careful, because the parents will come and say, what are you doing to my child? Why are you doing it? So there is that issue with the community, but working together, the school and the parents as partner, that when that parent walks into that school, that, how you go to Cold Stone and they start singing to you or whatever, they're welcoming you in. I've been to a school last week, and I was really to just turn away. Because they said, "Good morning, isn't it a good morning today?" And they were like, if I wasn't thinking that I came there because of the invitation of the students, I would have left. And I told the principal, is this how parents are welcome into the school? You don't have to be a board member. And I don't expect when I go to a school for them to be jumping. They're jumping because they know already where I'm going to the bathroom, to check the bathrooms, right? but it is a work with everyone. And also you touch on our students with special needs. Yes, because that is one of the things now. When I attended that national conference, students with special needs deserve to get the same services as all other students. They should not be treated differently. With Mr. Ada did talk about the school aides. We are very concerned because we found out that the other jurisdiction, their one-to-one aide are full-time. They are full-time, and if the CNMI public school system can have their school aid for special students, need students, full-time, why is it here with the government or the DOE? Are we spending too much of those funding on personnel in the top opposition, or are we accommodating these employees? I feel sorry for those employees because they don't know, this is where their bread and butter is at. And every end of the school year, their job is done. So my question when I sit with the superintendent, and maybe he has to get prepared with his staff, special ed school aides under federal fund cannot be used in any other duties. Only special ed students with special needs, because it's federally funded. We cannot do that. We're going to be cited by USDA. Well, let me tell you my observation. In the past few days that I visited, and the past weeks that I visited the textbook warehouse, the people who were there are teacher assistants, paid out of federal funding. And I personally asked them yesterday, what is your position title? Teacher assistant. What school? In Ron Elementary, Bryce Elementary. So I said, so you haven't been to your school? Said, for 2 weeks. That means that teacher in the classroom did not have the teacher assistant. This is federal funded, then why were they being used in fixing up the textbook? So thank you, Senator Esteves and Senator San Agustin and Senator Castro. But that's my concern too. And I'm speaking because that has been brought to me by parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairs. Mr. Lohan, how are you doing, James?
I'm fine.
All right, I'm going to
Mr.
ask you,
Alci.
I'm going to give you some time to speak because I know you've been like, come to them, call me. You got it. Thank you, James.
And senators of the committee. I know some of them have already left. My name is James Lujan. I'm a retired teacher a year and a half ago. About 30 years I spent teaching, 28 out in the field and a couple years in the classroom. I've been a chairman of the department, of my departments, so I've been involved with the leadership teams of the school. Environment dictates what we do, and being the Department of Education, we control that environment. And the nucleus of education or learning is in the classroom between the student, the teacher, and the parents. That's our focal point. Now, on a teacher standpoint, looking at the budget, you know, I can say that this budget's not enough. You know, in our day and age, this budget is really not enough. With the development that's going on and the technology that arises, this budget is not enough. You know, as a teacher, if you ask a teacher, they'll tell you this budget's not enough. And the reason why this budget is not enough is because when mandates are set, most especially when they're strict mandates, it requires demand. And right now the demand is large. The demand is so large that I don't even think the government of Guam budget is enough in that sense. But being on this committee, being a new member, looking at what we can do to cut, it almost becomes perilous that if we cut more than what we already been cut, you know, we're just paralyzing ourselves. Now, I don't know how to say or tell the legislature and the senators what they can do to help us in the sense, unless you understand what teachers go through and students and the people who work in the schools and what is required of them to achieve learning. And to me, that's very important. It's not always the dollar value, although we operate on the dollar value, but in our capacity as the board, I see reading the regulations on how boards would conduct themselves, or how this board would conduct ourselves. It seems that we were set up to fail. We don't have autonomy to do certain things. We regulate policy in that sense, but we cannot interfere with management in that sense to a certain extent. We don't control money. We may be able to construct a budget, may be more constructive, but I think we need your help in that sense, as far as partitioning the money. For example, the books that we've emphasized on in this day and age, we're into computers and internet in that sense. But not everybody in their capacity can achieve that even to this day. So if you ask a teacher, some would say we still need the books for those kids who are not as progressive as everybody else in the sense. E-books are great. Other alternatives of information are great. But along comes the cost. And I think that's where we probably have to be more constructive in the next few years as to how we conduct budget for the Department of Education. I consider the Department of Education the state education, since we govern, I guess, the charter schools, whether their budget is appropriate or we have a sign off on it. So I consider us as a state education. It's much more dignified, and I think we need to rise above to that occasion. And when it comes to budgeting, probably with books, that's something that maybe need to put on the side so that we can transition from books to technology. That's going to take some time, but maybe that's a resource of money that we have to probably expel from the budget in order to conduct that success of transition. And same with other things, the law itself conducting the books. We all know that Governor of Guam pays for books not only for public schools, but private schools. But if you take a look at the law states, I'm not going to quote it, but in the phrase it states, when a private school requests for books, they shall receive. But when a public school requests for books, they may receive. There's a difference. You got to look at those things, and
Is that a fact? Where can I find that
like
statement?
I said, it's in the policies that I've.
The only reason I say that, Mr. Lohan, is that, and I know where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've been on the board,
Yes.
so I know where you're coming from. The Organic Act requires that every child will be educated. That's why the government provides the funding. It is not that portion that you're referring to. But please continue.
Yes. I'm not saying cut somebody so the other one can be better. I'm just saying that's what I saw, and I tried to reason with it. But I'm saying maybe we need to think out of the box and say, since we're funding books for everybody on Guam because the Organic Act says it, then maybe we need to take that out of the equation and actually be more creative at designing a budget for books, whether it be e-books or alternative information or hard covers themselves. But I think that's something that we need to disassociate from the main budget of DOE, because it governs, or it is for the entire society, the entire community, all schools, not just public schools. Same with busing. Busing has the same effect in the law that states that. So somewhere along the line, we have to differentiate state education and, of course, private education. Although the Organics Act says this and that, but maybe we need to do...
You're talking about busing now?
No, busing, there's the same effect.
No, it doesn't impact you at all because the DOE doesn't get a budget for busing. DOE
No.
handles that budget. So
I'm just bringing it up
Yeah,
to,
okay.
you know, because we're all intertwined in that sense, you know. Teachers, I'm kind of glad there's a lot of teachers on the legislative membership in this sense, because now they understand that when we talk about $139 million for certified teachers, I'm not too sure if you know this, but when we certify teachers, you know, we can say that everybody in the classroom right now is certified. We granted them to teach, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they meet the maximum qualifications. So there's a degree of certification that they're meeting right now. Now, in this sense, you know, with the guidelines of how we mention certified teachers, maybe, you know, $5 million at this point may be the justification because of not having the full capacity of a fully certified teacher, although they may be a certified teacher, meaning that the teacher may have a degree but may not have the credentials to meet the education part of their degree for being a teacher. So that's where the difference is in teaching in that sense. There's a lot of work to be done on this budget. I believe it's more itemizing, an understanding of each of these 14 points that's important, because there are many mandates that evolve around the nucleus of learning. You know, come all the facilitation, you know, which are the facilitators and of course the people who support and the demands of that. With the federal programs, yes, grants can be done in the schools. I know I was asked to do a grant when I was at one time, and maybe about 15 years ago. I did a grant for a department that included the support of my department doing the grant. We never got the grant because it went to another school or went to somebody else, you know, in that sense. So I know how it is, but I do know that although we don't have to adopt certain things that the federal government offers, but when we ask for grants, come along mandates in the grants. And I think that's where we're coming from with all the external support and facilitation of learning, is that these grants have mandates internally. So we have to meet those mandates. And when you're talking about 41 schools, you know, it doesn't seem like much, 30,000 students, it doesn't seem like much, $10,000 per student, it doesn't seem like much, or actually it seems like a lot, but it really isn't much. Because learning is what we do that makes our community survive, you know, and between the parent, the student, and the teacher, that's where the focal point should be when we think about budget, you know. Everybody talks about budget, but nobody ever asks the teacher what really goes on in the classroom and what they need in that sense. And of course, everything overlaps. It adds on and it compounds. And that's why we have this big budget in the sense. Now, in the given state of the year, the budget may fluctuate because you don't have a certified teacher. So you save money on that salary, but really, we're doing a disservice because we didn't get a certified teacher. You know, we didn't affect learning to its full capacity because we didn't get a certified teacher. You know, one-to-one aids. I've taken on special ed students with disabilities. I one time they put 8 autistic kids in my class. Most of them with severe problems. You know, we have one-to-one aid. You know, and according to the law, that's what one-to-one means. 1 aide, 1 student. You know, so there's a lot of things that come into education, and I think we need to treat education differently the way we treat other agencies, because the survival of our society are our children, and we expect everything for our children, in that sense. Yes, again, I think we need to be more constructive with how we manage our budget, how we move it or delineate it so it's understanding. But reasoning becomes a little complicated because of the factor of learning and the survival of our society, which is our students. We demand everything for them in that sense. And with your help, and your understanding, having the experience being with education and having teachers in the legislature, I hope we can take this next few years and actually reform our state of education, so that we are in the right path, so that we don't have to come down here every year and try to reason out certain things in the budget. There are things that we really need to work on, but there are things that are just factual because of demand by our society. And I think that's where we need to move in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lohan. I'd just be, as a board member, I would just recommend you take a look at your budget. You really understand it. Because I've been through this budget process, not 1 year, not as a teacher, but for 6 years. And I know what the demand is, but I'd be just very careful. I like your comments, but I would just be very careful how you tread that water. Because I know for a fact our students today, our children, is our future. But if we don't price it right, we price them out, okay? And right now, as you mentioned, certified teacher, maybe they're not at the master level. That's not for you here to decide. That's what they call the certification office. What is the process? You should know that. You're a teacher. There's a process to get your master certification. So 55.5, 139 budget requests, come on. Everybody on this island that's watching this is going to say the math is wrong. Okay? I understand the one-to-one school aid. That's a federal mandate, right? Special ed? Not a federal mandates. Understand your budget. That's why I brought up in the beginning. The resolution does not give us a good picture. Every senator is looking at this already and saying, where's what they're talking about? It's not there. It's not here. So as I want to back your budget, because I understand why you need the money. I understand the needs. But I'm going to tell you right now, you guys are not good salespeople. You're not good salespeople. The product, if you took this to any auto shop or bike shop, they'll say, I'm not buying that car. I'm not buying that bike. And I own both, bike and car, and truck and boat. I couldn't buy with this selling piece of paper. I understand what you need. A lot of the senators understand what you need. But there's 15 of us. I need to convince 8 with me, 7 with me. Then we can pass it. I'm hoping to get you the closest to the amount you're asking, minus the charter school. Not counting the charter school. Because I don't believe the charter school should be taking it from DOE to begin with anyway. Because DOE didn't create the charter school. The Guam Legislature did. And for me, Guam Legislature, find the funding for them. Separate them from your equation. Because then it'll make kind of better sense. As far as the DOE having involvement in charter school, if you follow the law, all you do is review their budget and it goes right through you. Even some of the council members actually thought that they get to say approve or disapprove. I have to remind them of the law. It says you get a copy, council, DOE, review, submit in your budget, send it forward. That's all. I spoke to Mr. Fernandez a couple days ago. Why not have DOE play a role in the council? Why not the Board of Regents? Why not the Board of Trustees? Because why? The three institution impacts. There, you guys are the feeder school from the charter. Charter, there's only 2 schools right now, 2 charter councils or charter schools. They're only elementary. So where do they go after that? DOE. If not, private school. If we want to look at the cost of schools, honestly, call up the private schools that I've been calling them. What does it cost per child? Most of them is not more than $6,500. So ask yourself the question, do you really need $10,100? Or is there a possibility that maybe we need to take a look at the setup of DOE? And maybe there's some parts that need to be removed or outsourced and budget separately. Good example, your grass cutting. When I was on the board, that was taken away by the Guam Legislature, given to the mayors. You all and every senator can drive around at every school and the grass is not cut. I've been out there with nonprofit organizations and helped cut grass. And there's money going to them to cut. They're not being cut. Something to consider. Maybe we need to outsource that. I hate to give it back to DOE because you know why? If we recommend give it back to DOE, if you don't have money in other areas, the grass won't get cut, but other areas will be funded, right? That's really what's good. You guys are going to juggle with the money. Outsourcing it may be the best way. DOC can cut the grass. They've been doing it for everybody for free. There are a lot of options out there. I have Senator Will Castro wants to, as the vice chair, he has several things he wants to bring up, but he said it's going to be real short, just like everybody said. And then we'll wrap it up, okay?
Mr. Chairman, you mentioned food. I guess that's my cue to keep it under 3 minutes because I know we didn't budget for a merienda. Thank you for your input, your updates, your responses. It's my role as the vice chair in support of the chairman here to reinforce that the committee stands as a willing and capable partner in wanting to strengthen the education system. You have a former substitute teacher, parents of the education system, small business owner, compliance officer, planner, etc. For me, without speaking on behalf of the committee, to the last couple points, while the chairman and Senator Estevez bring focus to operations and finances, I'm more inclined to think about the planning side and also about the center of the education enterprise, which Mr. Lohan raised earlier, which is teaching and learning. I know that Senator Nelson said as much. So we look forward to working with you folks in another forum, Mr. Sanchez, Mr. Lohan, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Superintendent. We want to encourage, as you mentioned also, stronger partnerships. One such example was when Mr. Sanchez at a Master's in Public Administration conference raised the need, actually brought up a good point that we lack certain localized material for the curriculum, and some folks in the executive branch were able to work with your team, or at least based on your feedback, to secure, and it's just been recently reprogrammed, Mr. Superintendent. It's good news. Reprogram about $150,000, and so we're looking forward to anywhere between July and September to have this strategic planning session in partnership with DOE, our partners, so we can have some focus on a comprehensive education outreach strategy to get you that material, whether it's your conventional textbook or electronic format. But the point is, we look forward to that innovative thinking that you spoke at some length about, Mr. Lohan, as a member of the board. Now back to the committee. The chairman had asked me to kind of highlight a few things that were of particular importance. For example, high risk. It's a protracted matter and at a very expensive price to the people of Guam. And I want to encourage you to lean into a member of your board now who has a pretty good grasp of turning systems around, and that would be Mark Mendiola. He was involved with the Northern Marianas College turnaround strategy when they were on show cause. And so Mr. Chairman made a request, and I want to underscore that to ensure, Mr. Superintendent and Mr. Chairman, if we can get a copy of the corrective action plan and keep us in the loop. We want to be a strong advocate for you. As much as we want to hold people accountable, we're all in this together. I'm also, and it was mentioned from some other folks here, we're having sidebars on updates to the planning elements. particularly, I know we spoke yesterday about this, Mr. Superintendent, the technology master plan and the CIP. There is a provision of law that requires that prior to any further investments or indebtedure that it is accompanied by a master plan of some sort. And so we want to make sure that we cover our end of the bargain. Again, going back to what we believe, at least most members of the committee, to be at the center of this discussion is teaching and learning. So we want to encourage you to invite us back at another forum, maybe not here, but another forum within the department, so we can establish that clear separation between teaching and learning and operations. I know that's something the chairman's also emphasizing, and I don't need to go on much longer about the issues focusing and centering around student learning, student safety in particular, Mr. Superintendent. When you have middle school students armed and intoxicated, it is a bigger problem than DOE. It's a community issue, and so I'm sure we need to get other stakeholders around that table to have that discussion. Know this, in closing, that the committee is solvent, that we are focused on reform legislation that will occur in the 34th Guam Legislature, and it will encompass revisiting the 14 points, whether to completely do away with most of that in its entirety or to reinforce it. But those are one of the main issues we're going to look at, in addition to how we structure the department. So we want to work in partnership with you, Mr. Superintendent. And Mr. Chairman, if that's all you got, I mean, I'm sure you can pick up where I left off. So thank you again for coming out.
Board members, Mr. Superintendent, management team, I'm hoping that your budget has your organizational chart. It will, right, Tali? Because if I'm correct, when I was on the board, it never got approved. If you submit it with the budget and the budget is approved, your organizational chart will be approved. You don't need to go to the AAA and all that. If you don't submit it, I know we'll be expecting to attend and participate in your hearings. But for both, don't wait. The opportunity is here. It's like Mr. Meno told me out there, just do it. Fix the resolution, give us something everybody can understand, identify your shortfalls. We want to help you. And I do, and I will be addressing and asking the Speaker of the Guam Legislature that even though you submitted a 326, it's not inclusive of the charter school. I'm going to ask that the charter school not take its funding from you. Okay? I think that would be a great start. And that if your budget could also identify in the resolution how much you're paying for books to private schools and anything else you're providing anybody else. And exactly what Mr. Luan said, it shouldn't be part of your budget. But we need to know if it's in the budget. Because like he said, when they ask, you shall give. And if you ask, we will make an effort to give. But we need to know. All right? Does anybody have anything they wanted to bring up? Any of the management team want to bring up anything?
Senator,
Ms. Gutierrez.
going back to the organizational chart, and you know, and I know, that it was never really approved.
That's correct.
You know that. And I have given the department March 31st during our work session, the finance work session, and I have yet to see it, and I'm counting that my clock is ticking of when the board should receive that organizational chart, because I know that you raised that concern, you brought that concern to mind. So I hope that before the end of this week, it should be coming to the board for review.
I know I'm going to get it before June. And you know why? When the budget hearing starts, I'm going to be asking, where's it at? Where's it at? Where's it at? And I'm hoping to see Mr. Mendiola's reappointment nominee, because he's due to expire next week. I'll call the governor's office and I ask him, where's his letter? So that we can have you scheduled for, I think it's April 20th is our next, April 20th is our next, I have another public hearing. Okay. So if I get it sometime real soon, I need 5 days, and I can get you scheduled. Mr. Superintendent, not for you to close, but we'll let the chairman close it.
You know, just a couple of things just to reinforce, but I know we did spend a lot of time on this, but I do want to just raise it for the record and for your consideration. when we talk about facilities and maintenance, we do, I mean, what you'll see what's in our request. Now, I think all of us understand that there's a $100 million procurement out there, and we'd love to see, because that was meant to address some of the deferred maintenance, $90 million in deferred maintenance that the Department of Interior identified. And we're getting some pieces from DOI assistance. That procurement, $100 million procurement, is out there. But in the interim, because we're still not finished, you know, we put in the request for facilities and maintenance work on things like canopies, restroom renovations, fence lines, things that you hear about from your constituents just as we do. So I want to, you know, as we go along, emphasize that, because one of the things that we benefited from earlier was a bond that was available to help with facilities. That's all been depleted for a couple years now. So what we're dealing with is, if we don't get some support to make sure that we have a basic level until the rest of the funds come available, you know, we'll get more of these issues that we need to fix for our students. So just on that, and I'm definitely going to emphasize that.
Okay.
But I want to make sure, because we didn't spend a lot of time on that, and I think as well, you know, in that $100 million is money that was for our master facilities plan. That shouldn't take more than 6 months if the money is available, but because it's held up in the procurement, we haven't really been able to launch that. So, you know, any help in addressing, you know, these types of issues would be helpful.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. One final note. You guys all have a copy of Bill 70?
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about? Simon Sanchez Charter? Please read the bill. Think about it. The bill does not direct a conversion to charter. It gives you, the board, the authority to convert, not the legislature. Think about it. You've asked questions in the media. Employment, it's in the law. Not the bill. It's in the law. Think about it. Come up with your own recommendation. Committee's always willing to give any comments. Does anybody else have anything else to we're going to wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm going to wrap it up, sir.
All right, Mr. Mendoza.
I just
Hope to
want
see
to
your
thank...
nomination.
I just want to thank you for the opportunity to come down. This is my first go around at it with the Department of Education budget. Knowing that it's the largest budget within the government of Guam, I know there's a lot at stake here, and I appreciate the dialogue and the conversation. Now, I kind of have the understanding of the expectations from this committee, your education committee, and I took a lot of copious notes, and definitely we're going to be bringing it back to our, I'm actually going to be calling for another work session within the budget. And I do appreciate the opportunity to continue to come back to the legislature as things come up, but you know, I like that. You guys like concrete answers. We're going to give you concrete responses, and sometimes things are going to be said that we don't like to hear, but it's the harsh reality of it. It's, you know, we're dealing with people's lives here. And just for the record, I am a product of the Opportunity Room, the Purple Popcorn, Mr. Castro, I think is what it was. But you know, there are things in our department that is working, and the people behind me and the people that are in the schools. I'm an active parent. I represent the parents on this committee, on the board. And rest assured that under the leadership of the current board here, and we're going to be meeting with the superintendent, and we're going to outline certain things that our expectations, as well as what he's going to bring to the table in terms of turning some of the things around within the department. So I look forward to more dialogue, and I appreciate the opportunity to come before this committee to share with you what we've been working on, and rest assured we're going to continue to work on to improve. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, do you have anything you wanted to?
So I don't delay much longer. Thank you very much. This is a town meeting. Expecting a little bit more, but it's good. At least we've shared openness of what we need to do, and so it can just flow right through the 15 individuals within this legislature. Thank you, and we got work to do.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. It is now 12:37. This town hall meeting has now ended. Thank you.